And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Turo live stream. We are trying to be, well, I'm trying to be festive today. Thank you for joining us. This is, like I said, Turo live stream where we discuss tips and tricks to take that off to help you either get started or optimize your existing Turo or even private car rental business, as well as try to answer any questions that you may have. I'm Yuly, and this is Max. Hello,
Hey,
Max. And for everyone who's watched the prior ones, I'm sure you'll be happy to see Max sitting down
I know.
for many comments.
Always moving around. Glad to be sitting down as well.
He's always busy, so it's a good sign, right?
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
so w- we are currently streaming on both of our channels, Engineer Your Life and King of Rentals. And again, thank you so much for being here, whether you're here live or you're going to catch this on the replay. Thanks again. Just a quick intro, Max. I don't know if you wanted to just give a quick intro about you and your channel, and also your, Turo host
Yeah, of
details.
course. I started my Turo business about 2.5, almost 3 years ago with my brother, and we started with one car. We slowly snowballed it, and now we're up to 23 cars. And we're kind of getting ready for another expansion. And we started with Turo, then we kind of jumped into private, and now we're doing a lot of private rentals right now. And it's just been a really good journey. Started my YouTube channel about a year ago, and I've just been trying to share as much information as I can without holding back. I just try to give everybody all the information that I know, and I hope it's helping people out there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure tons of people are getting tons of value from I mean, so you're a Turo host, but then you also have your channel where you go around and you interview, you share all of your experiences, but then you also go around and you interview tons of other hosts from, all levels, from the, other 20 cars to 200 plus cars,
Yeah,
which you gain different types of knowledge from each of those.
yeah, and I think
So yeah, definitely.
that's where a lot of people come, and I think a lot of the information's there because a lot of people that have big fleets, they don't share any information. They don't have YouTube. They don't have anything. So I guess it's kind of cool to be able to pick the brains of all these big operations and really learn how they do it. Because I can't imagine having a 200 car fleet or 1,200 car fleet, and being able to operate it. So it's kind of cool to see what goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's awesome. And so a little intro about myself. I'm nowhere near where Max is. I've only had 3 cars at one time. I'm currently looking to purchase another 2 or 3. So hopefully I'll have like a 5, 6 car fleet soon. But my channel is a primarily a tech channel, tech finance, and being an engineer, anything I get into, I super analyze and I do tons of research, tons of you know, uh, looking into every possible detail and just to optimize anything I get into. And so I started doing that, and so I thought I'd start sharing that as part of my YouTube journey. And so far all of my videos have been focused on Turo, but I'm going to slowly now start incorporating some of the tech stuff with a focus on Turo, so it'll be helping entrepreneurs, business owners, but specifically Turo hosts with using technology that can really help them in their businesses, whether it's Turo or anything else that they're involved in.
Yeah, and
So
I think what you do with the numbers, the way that you analyze things, is really smart because it's something that most people don't do. But with you having your size fleet, what do you think are some of the most important numbers to look at that you've seen so far?
well, I think, definitely, like, again, and maybe sometimes I overdo it because I think somebody who has this many cars is probably not thinking about these things. But I think, I keep track of everything, because how do you really truly know if you're making money? Like, how do you, for example, I have a video where, I talk about revenue and profit, and I break it all down, and and I say and explain every little part that affects each of those. Um, but and of course, I don't get into tax and depreciation in that one, because that's just a whole nother level. But how do you truly know if you're just saying, a lot of the times when you interview hosts and you ask them, hey, how much money do you make, or what do you do? They always throw out revenue, but
Yeah,
that's kind of like totally irrelevant.
yeah, it doesn't make
So I keep track of everything, like, you know, the Uber trips back and forth, because in my case, I pay for those. The time that I'm paying the person that went, and in my case, I have family members helping doing that. So I manage. I If it's related, it's linked to the trip. If it's car related, it's linked to the car. So if it's an oil change, tires, anything like that, it's linked appropriately where it needs to be. So at the end of the day, I could say, did this car make me money? Or did yeah, I made all this money, but then I have all these expenses that I didn't account for, or I
Yeah.
just, didn't worry about. And so I think that's probably the most important thing, because
Yeah.
that's the only way you're gonna really be like, right now, I shouldn't be looking to buy other cars if I didn't know what certain cars were actually making me, you
Mhm.
know?
That's fair. And I think a lot of the people that get into Turo, they don't have a business mindset, or they've never been in business. So because it gives them an opportunity to do something that they normally wouldn't be able to, which is cool. It's really really cool. But they don't understand the net, and that's what you need to be looking for. So a lot of these people look at the gross revenue and they think, oh, like I'm making so much money. But like you said, when you don't look at the net, I mean, the gross really doesn't mean anything. So a lot of these people, some of them will do the net, like they'll have a P&L sheet from like their QuickBooks or something, but they don't take into consideration the depreciation, which is like the Turo business killer. And I think a lot of the people that don't do their numbers and stuff, they're gonna on the back end, whenever they want to sell the company or the cars, whatever that may look like, they're probably in for a big surprise. So I'm glad that you
Yeah,
do
I
that
think
early
that's
on.
probably gonna be Yeah, I think that's probably gonna be the biggest one. It's just that that's one that you don't think about, or kinda, like, don't wanna think about now, because you're just seeing money coming in. I mean, I'll say, like, I'm guilty of that, in the sense that I haven't really I've started to look at it, but I haven't worried as much about it, because I guess I've been netting enough. I've been netting like $800 a month from that one car, even though I've been paying for the services. I've probably handled 4 trips myself the entire year, and I've been paying family, to help me do yeah. So I think that's why I'm like, okay, well, I know that if once I take into account the depreciation, I'm still gonna be pretty good right now, especially since I've looked at every possible expense.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's definitely one that I think it's easy to kind of like just not look at, and then it just kind of creeps up when it's time to, oh,
Oh
I
yeah.
have to get rid of the car.
It's a silent killer for sure. It's a very silent
Let's
killer.
bring up real quick some questions here. We have Denny Cars says, "Hi guys, what's another insurance you can use, not Lula?"
First off, what's wrong with Lula? And I know a lot of people that use them. But there's a lot of alternatives. There's big companies. Somebody just mentioned ABI, which I only know a couple people that use them, so I don't have too many thoughts on that. We use GMI, which is another one similar to Lula. I say it really depends on what you're looking to do and where you live. Like we use GMI because it's a lot cheaper, and we do a lot of private rentals, so it's cheaper from an insurance standpoint, and we have $1 million umbrella policy. But we don't have Lula has like a vetting software that you can use to determine whether renters are going to be good or not. For private renters, they have like some software that they use, and it'll show you their driving history, and I think their criminal history, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe just one of the two. But I mean, that's pretty cool. So it really depends on what you want to do. But on top of that, there are, I mean, a lot of the bigger companies, not everyone, but like State Farm, Liberty Mutuals, who we were with before. There's a lot of those big insurance companies that have programs like this. A lot of the reps won't know about it. Like you have to kind of talk to the right person in the company, but they'll have like behind the scenes programs that you can use. They're typically going to be more expensive than companies like Lula, but it's an alternative for states or cities that don't offer this kind of coverage.
Danny Carr says, "Thanks, guys, so much." You're
Yeah.
welcome. Yeah, so I reached out myself to Liberty Mutual a while back when I was doing research for that insurance video, and they actually were one that said yes, that they would insure you privately. So this is not a Lula and ABI situation. This is actually like a private insurance. And but it was ridiculous. I think it was like $800 a month or something. I mean, I was
Whoa.
like, well, that's kind of pointless. But the rep did say that she suggested that I call. They have like a special department. And she said, well, why don't you call this department and see, they may be able to work with you. It's more of like a business type department. I don't know. But I never did. So that is something that I'll probably check out.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I should. probably take this off. It's very loud.
We
Probably
did.
gonna be very annoying later.
We can't even hear it. But we did Liberty Mutual in the beginning, and it was very similar price wise. Like at the time we were with Liberty Mutual, they didn't really have like a full program for it. It's kind of like a personal policy, but they had a strong understanding that like we were doing rentals. But we weren't allowed to do private rentals, and there's a cap to it. So it's like 10 cars, and after that, like you either have to start a new policy with a new person because one person's allowed to have 10, or like you have to find something else. So we had 10 cars. We're like, this, like we have to find an alternative. We can't just keep doing this and getting a bunch of policies. So that's when we switched to GMI.
Yeah, I'm curious why the question about Lula, though. Although I will say I had a consultation this past week with someone that actually one of the main questions was, have you had any, have you heard any negative things about Lula? Because I saw a video about someone that says that they had a claim and they were getting denied, and so that, or getting dropped after the claim or something like that.
That's great.
But so you said you have heard that or no? Like you
Well,
have heard some negative.
I've heard bad things about everybody, but there. I mean, there's no perfect company. The one thing that I did see from Lula, I don't know where I saw this. Maybe it's like on Facebook or something. There was a period in time in which Lula said we're not paying out for claims for this time frame, and I saw that and I said that. I mean, that should be illegal. I don't know how an insurance company cannot. I don't know if they were like delaying payment or not paying it. I mean, regardless, they probably should be doing either. But I saw that and that kind of worried me. But I know a lot of the biggest hosts that I know do Lula. So guys with 140.
Was it paying?
Was it what?
Oh, I think so. My screen froze for some reason. But I guess you can still hear me.
Mm-hmm.
Let me. No, I am still frozen for some reason. Can you still hear me though? And I'll just keep messing with the.
Try to turn off the camera and turn it back on. That'll work. It's just us.
Oh, okay. I don't know what happened there.
There it is. Back.
All right, we're good. This time it's me. Somebody had to have some issues, right?
Yeah, somebody had to have something. What were you asking?
So we were talking about the Lula thing. I did want to say one thing that came up recently, which I was shocked about. I actually had this as one of the items I wanted to mention today. So I had another consultation with someone this week, and they mentioned that they started doing their Turo profile. They set it up. They went through. They almost got everything, but they had a few little things that they were still trying to like iron out. And so the profile got listed, and I think overnight they noticed, it was just from like, it must have been a few hours, they noticed that it had been listed, and they're like, oh my gosh, freaked out, because they're like, no, I'm not ready yet. So they unlisted it, and a few days later they got an email from Geico, their personal insurance that they've been with for 18 years, telling them that they were canceled, their policy was canceled. And when they called, they were told that it was because it was something to do with, Uber and ride sharing, whatever. They didn't mention Turo specifically, but they just said something with, oh, we have, I guess, like reason to believe that, this car is being used for Uber or whatever. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, so yeah, ultimately they said they couldn't.
How'd they get proof of that? How would Geico even get notified?
So I have heard before of people getting dropped, and that is one of the things, and that's why, I made a whole video about it, because it is a huge thing. But first of all, I was pretty certain that California was one of the states that, if I believe, don't quote me on it, but I believe California was one of the states that was that they had enacted laws that say that the carriers can't drop insurers just because they're doing Turo. So unless I'm wrong about that being one of the states, or unless something changed. So I was already shocked because it was California. And then I was shocked that it was like he hadn't even fully like he had just listed it at night and took it off the next morning, unlisted it because he wasn't ready. So that's pretty crazy. And then the fact that they wouldn't even add him back on, even though he's like, guys, I've been with you for 18 years. And he had to go to another insurance.
Sounds
So
like
it's
sounds fishy. I'd have somebody look into that. That's pretty
yeah, it's pretty wild. We were yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard of that happening. I don't even know how they even have the database to get that information to drop something like that. That's crazy.
That's I mean, obviously they have there's something. I just didn't I'm shocked that it was so
Yeah.
fast, and so, you know what I mean, like within a few 2-3 days, I think he says he got the email, or he had gotten it right away and noticed it like 3-4 days later. So yeah, that was pretty wild.
Yeah, that's weird. I've never heard of that.
And I did have ABI briefly, I think for like a month, but then Lula came out with their whole thing of, connecting with CarSync. And since I love integrations and all the, I changed to Lula. But I think Lula I liked because it was, more techy, because it was connected to CarSync and all that. And ABI was more like the older style system, but I don't know. I really haven't had enough experiences or communications with them to be able to say one is
Yeah.
better than the other.
Yeah. Me neither. I haven't heard enough about ABI to know much.
Let's bring up this question here. So Evan says, "Hey, I was curious how the process would work if a renter got a flat tire. Is the process similar to an accident? Would the renter take care of getting a new tire during and after the trip, Turo and private?"
They're both.
So I'm sure
They're
you've
both
had
yeah, I've
experience with
had
these.
experiences in both. They're very situational. If it's the guest's fault, like they did something, like they hit like a nail or something. I know that's technically not their fault, but if it happened to them during the reservation, well, actually on Turo, if you're All-Star host or Power host, you get credit like $200 to go towards a tire if something happens, and that's just during a reservation. Like that's almost practically no matter what during a reservation. And then if it's private, it's very situational. We had a guy, and this is probably one of the only situations we had something like this, but we had a guy, and he woke up one morning and he had his tires had been slashed, which is kind of a weird situation. We weren't sure. I mean, we didn't really get the full story, but in a situation like that where it's his fault, we made him go out and get a new tire and pay for it, and then we let him keep renting it. But that's the only experience. I think if it's your fault, like if the tread was like super worn down and then it just like popped, maybe it could be considered the owner's fault. But if something happens during the reservation and it's the guest's fault, and there's kind of a gray line there, then yeah, you get reimbursed either through Turo, or you can try to request it through the guest. You could probably do, what would it be called? Like work with the guest. It'd be kind of a claim, but work through the guest. I'm sure you could do that. And then private rentals, it's either you try to get them to pay or you take it out of their deposit. Whatever's easiest, I guess. You could do either one.
Yeah, I actually had it happen once recently, and I actually noticed they hadn't told me anything, but I noticed because I got an alert on the Chevy app. It said your tire's low, and then it said your tire's flat. And so I reached out to the guest, and they said, "Oh, yeah, we hadn't noticed. Yeah, it's flat. We'll take, I think they said we'll take a look at it tomorrow." And I didn't hear anything else. They just, when they got back, they just left the receipt that they had gone and gotten it patched up. So,
Wow, interesting. And
but that
sometimes,
was the first time.
yeah, and I guess it also depends on. It's very situational. I think, like if it's local, it's a lot different than if it's far away. An example is we had a renter, and she was renting for like a month or two, and something happened with the tire. I'm not sure what it was, but it popped, and it wasn't the guest's fault. So we went out and got a tire and got it replaced for her, and then brought her the car back. So we took care of that. But if it's farther away and maybe it's our fault, then we probably have the guest take care of it still, and then we reimbursed it reimburse them for it. Would be my initial thought process on that.
Yeah, and also to, what you mentioned earlier about the tread and all that, like definitely if it's something that, is an oversight on our part, like the tires low, I mean that could become an issue even when um if there's a claim, they crashed. And so Turo may come back and even say, "Hey, but you were supposed to have put new tires on this. So this is your fault." And you can actually run into like a situation where, they may get a little about paying. And recently, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but recently they sent out an email with a ton of like updates. And a lot of the things, I want to reread it again because I kind of just glanced over it. But some of the things they're mentioning is that they're getting stricter with the maintenance, with us being on top of maintenance.
I didn't see
Yeah.
that.
So, like, I think, and if you go look at the terms of service, which I did look at it a few days ago, it states in there that, you have to make sure before every trip that you go through this whole checklist, and it includes things like that. Like for example, I just remembered one of the things that they're talking about is battery. If the battery can't be like more than 5 years old, and if there's some like exceptions, but yeah, they're getting like really strict with the maintenance stuff. One of the thoughts I had was maybe using the some time in some of these live streams to go over like some of these like important updates, because they're really,
That's
like,
smart.
for example, one of the updates is that, and again, I glanced over this, so I don't want to say like this. I don't want to be quoted on all of these because I want to go back and reread them. But one of the things was that now all bookings are going to be automatic. Like you can no longer have that option,
Yeah,
right? Did
yeah,
you
they
read
won't.
that?
Yeah, you won't be able to accept them. And it's funny. I was just talking to Alvin. He's like 200 and something cars, and I saw him at the Powerhouse event, and we're talking. He's like, he's the one that goes in and manually accepts all of the extensions and all of the bookings. And I'm like, dude, that's
Wow.
crazy. I don't know why you don't do instant book. And he's like, I don't know. It's just the way I've been doing it. And then they announced that at the Powerhouse Summit, and I was kind of laughing and talking to him about that. But it's smart. I mean, it doesn't make sense to not approve somebody. I mean, it makes sense in a standpoint of like an individual who like doesn't rent it out very often. Maybe they use it for work, and then they're really willing to rent it out on the weekends, which they'll probably have to build some sort of parameters around that. But for an individual that buys cars for Turo, which is the majority of people, its primary use is Turo. I mean, it's that idea is kind of built around that, I'd guess. But I'm sure they'd have to have. I'm sure they'll build some parameters for the people that aren't wanting that, because I'm sure there's just going to be a huge backup of cancellations when that comes out.
Yeah, I mean, I know that when I started, like before because a year and a half ago is when I started, when I purchased an additional car just for Turo. Before that, I was just kind of renting my car that was just sitting there at home. And so when I did that a few years back, which was just renting my car, and it was the beginning, I had just started, it was probably like 2019. Um, I remember, like, wanting to review every single one because you're freaking out, you don't know who's gonna book your car, you're like, "Well, I don't know, I wanna be able to, like," and I can see how that, how somebody wants that, and it also depends because if you are renting in that market, it was more of like a local market, and so sometimes you get some, like, shady kind of, potential guests, and so you want to have the ability to, like, say nope, but I when I started this past year when I started doing it, fully as a fully, business where you separate yourself from your car, it's not your baby anymore. And, then I was like, yeah, there's no point in limiting. I'm sure I would be limiting myself from a ton of bookings by not having that automatic. And, thankfully, maybe it's because of the type of car that I've had, that lends itself more to like a family, trip kind of thing. I haven't had any issues where I'm like, oh, kind of worried as I
Yeah.
used to be a few
But
years
and
back.
there's no way, even if you're like, well, I don't want to rent it to, I want to be able to vet my customers. There's not even a way to vet it. All you get is a photo of them, the dates, and then their phone number, and then the contact. You can, message them through the app. So I mean, the only vetting you'd be able to do is judging a book by its cover, which I mean, honestly, isn't fair, and that's hard to go off of. I guess another thing is you can go based on the reviews, which I mean, Turo kind of does that. Like if somebody has like really bad reviews, then they'll probably kick them off the platform. I've heard of them kicking them off the platform, which I think is fair. Like if people are doing, we've had a ton of people kicked off the platform for doing, they'll do board runs to Mexico. So we'll call those in right away and we'll get them kicked off immediately. But
That's
I think they
crazy.
do a decent for their scale. I think they do a decent job of vetting, even though they mess up sometimes. Like if your vetting system was really really strong, they probably would be a quarter the size that they are now. And so sometimes you kind of have to have you have to let a couple more people in than you'd want to, or else none of us would have any business to even operate.
Yeah, I think some of the like more shady kind of bookings were more like when I used to not, when it was just my car and I used to have it like where you can book it for a day or two. And those are the ones that are kind of like, now I have like the big, um the big SUV 8-seater is I think I have a minimum of 5 days and it's been booked constantly.
That's so
Yeah.
crazy. I can't think of a 5-day minimum.
Yeah,
But
I have 5 days
that's
and I was considering 7.
oh my gosh, that's crazy.
But I
But
feel like most of my bookings for that car have been 10-day bookings. Like that's
that's
like like that's on average 10 days.
That's crazy. I mean, but that's a really fair assumption of the people that are not good renters are the ones that are doing the 1 day unlimited mile cars. Like the more wide open your settings are, the more possibilities of bad things. And that's what I've seen. I've seen a lot of the people that have shorter, more flexibility, I guess, just are worse renters. But it's very dependent because some people book for a day and then extend for, like we had that happen. Lady booked for a day and ended up extending for a month. So, I mean, I don't know. But yeah,
Yeah, we had that happen one time too.
that's usually where the
I thought
bad
it
rent
was
comes from.
yeah, because those are the ones that I feel like are kind of like getting the cars to kind of do certain things or to run around and like yeah, you can kind of get into some it's again, it's not, your typical like family flying in and they need a car for a week or,
Yeah. But it's
it's
hard.
a little different, but I guess
Yeah, from a Turo standpoint, it's really hard to vet that. Like the only thing that they have access to is their driver's license, which gives them access to the driving record, and then possibly their I don't know what else. Maybe like a couple little things, but it's really hard to like really vet people based on just that information. So I don't know. I think they still do a pretty good job with what they have.
yeah, and I think you kind of have to like, in the beginning I was also worried about, the whole well back then it was the whole contact list. It was before COVID, so it wasn't that, that big. So I was actually meeting people, handing them the keys, which I hated, but it was also a way to like, let me see your license, let me see and all. And so to go from that to you're dropping off the car at the airport, you have no idea who's picking it up. You're kind of just hoping that, I heard a ton of stories about Turo Go and how there's been so many cars stolen but I mean, I guess those are just risks you're going to have to take and hope that nothing, happens because it's just the convenience. It's, you know, you can't have 20, 30 cars and go and meet these people in person every time and say hello and spend 30 minutes there and if they're late just hang around.
Yeah,
So some
that's fair.
things you kind of just evolve into.
Yeah, and it's part of the risk of the business. I mean, any business you get into, there's going to be some sort of calculated risk, and it's just the risk in the business. But honestly, nothing we could do. The only alternative or possible thing you can do is private rentals, which is what we do, and there's a lot more control. Like if you don't want to take a booking, like you're not going to take a booking. You can increase your cushion, which would be like your deposit. So there's ways around it. But I mean, when you're working with Turo, like you're at their mercy. I mean, whatever they say goes. And if they change their policy on you, like they change their policy. There's nothing you can do about it.
Let's bring up Kayla Carlota's question is, do you feel you have to be close to an airport to be successful, or have you ever heard of a host that is successful further away from an airport?
I think it's very dependent on. I think the most important thing is your photos, your settings, and your car, like how you set up your profile. But when you think about every little thing adds to, okay, it's gonna be booked out more and more and more. This is a big factor for sure. I mean, I've talked to a lot of hosts that are far away from the airport and they're getting like the revenue they're making is very small compared to the people that are really close to the airport. Then I also know really big hosts that are really far away from the airport, but because their settings are so dialed in, they have really, really good photos, they have really, really good descriptions, like everything that they do is like top tier, they still have a successful business. So I don't think it's a must, but if you can get close, it's just a bonus. I mean, it doesn't hurt. All it's going to do is increase your convert. All it's going to increase your bookings and increase your revenue. There's no harm to that.
Yeah, like Aubrey is one where I think she doesn't do any airport, right? I think Aubrey is one of the bigger hosts, and she has a channel as well. And she, I think, but it's also gonna change who you're catering to. So like the guests are more like local guests,
Yeah,
and she has, which kind of goes in hand with like the type of cars she has. She has a little bit more like economical cars, and which caters more to like the local renters, and she's making a killing. So it just kind of depends. It's gonna affect the type of renter as well.
yeah,
But and then you also have the ability to like get, look into to some businesses like the one that we mentioned in our first live stream, which is a somebody that I had communicated with, we'll put that in the description here. But it's basically they're trying to establish, they already did it in California, and they're trying to do it all around the country, where they're getting a parking lot close to an airport, and you basically give them the car, and they have it there, they park it there for you, they check the cars in and out, they clean them, check the cars in and out, and then they have like little shuttles that take the guests to and from the airport. And I believe he said the cost was like $300, but of course, these are all probably dependent on area too and all that, but that's also, you know, um an option if you just try the not, doing the local without the airport. And if if it doesn't go well, then can you still hear me? Because I froze again, Max.
yeah, we can hear
Okay, you can still hear me. Okay. I'll try to fix my camera. You can keep chatting. I don't know why it's doing this today.
you. Yeah, but I mean, that yeah, there are solutions like that. I mean, Phoenix has something called pre-flight, which allows you to park your car at the airport. They like do check-in and check out stuff for you. So there's a lot of good solutions, but it's also something you probably calculate. Like maybe if pre-flight's 150 bucks a car and it can generate you an extra 200 bucks a month, maybe then it makes sense. But if it's like 100 bucks, 150 bucks a car, and it only generates you another 100 bucks a month or 150 bucks a month, and it kind of evens out, then maybe it's not worth the hassle. So that's something where you can like do a little bit of calculation. And there's like what I would do if I was looking at moving close to the airport, which we're already pretty dang close, is I would reach out to people that are at pre-flight or really close to the airport, just on Facebook or something, and find comparables, like cars that they have that are the same, and see how well they're performing, and look at their numbers and their price per car. I mean, not everybody's going to share this, but I'm sure if you talk to enough people, they will. But that's a way to do it without having to take the risk of possibly going out there and having to sign a year lease. I don't think they do that, but at the parking spaces. But I just finding a way to mitigate risk. Another quick solution is, I always tell people this: hotels. Like, if you want to get really close to the airport, there's always going to be hotels around. And I've heard of a lot of people making partnerships with hotels where they can park the cars at the hotel for X cost, which is always cheaper than going to the parking spaces. And you set up a partnership where you say, hey, if I ever get somebody wanting a hotel, I'll send you the business. And if you ever get somebody that wants to rent a car, send them to me. That way, not only are you getting cheaper parking, you're also getting a referral base, which is like, when you talk about private rentals, that's like one of the biggest portions of it.
Yeah, and something else that I thought of as you were saying, about contacting people and finding out. Another option maybe too is kind of going into on Turo in your area, and see which cars like don't have airport delivery, because that would tell you which ones are, would be just local. And then if you wanted to do something like Turex, that Chrome extension, where you pay, it's $15 a month. I'm actually going to be doing a video showing how it works, because somebody asked to do a tutorial. But there's some other ones online right now. But basically, you would go in and you would be able to download all of the cars in that area, and then you can link up the ones that you saw that didn't offer delivery, and see what they've been doing, because it'll show you like how much money or how many days they've been rented. And so you'll be able to see if like those local cars have revenue coming in. So that's also another option. And it'll only cost you $15 because it's 15 a month. So, anything you can kind of like get your hands on to make the best decision, I think it's probably worth doing. And we're just bringing this up. Kayla says, "Awesome, thank you both. I've tested some areas, but we'll definitely do that research you suggested and reach out. Great idea." You're
Also,
welcome.
a quick thought for that, an additional thought is sometimes there's just certain cities that don't perform well. I don't know. I don't have a list off the top of my head, but if you're in a city that doesn't perform well, and let's say you're like 40% under how well it should be performing, and maybe you can find a host in a city that is performing and it's 40% higher. Maybe they only charge 30% or X amount per month. Um, I would look into that as well. I mean, just a thought. Like if you can make additional revenue and not have to do anything, obviously that's a goal. But I just know that there's a lot of cities and not really states, more of cities that just don't perform well. And knowing that's an option is always good.
Let's bring up here. I'm going to butcher this, but Ifkihar Ahmed says, "At what point do you think you should get parking spaces? Right now, I have 4 at the moment, adding fifth one in a couple of weeks. Started in September."
We didn't get so we used my parents' house until we got to 6, and then we used my brother's house, just his house alone, because my parents didn't want us to have cars in front of theirs anymore. Until we got to 12, and we're parking them like down the street and stuff. And we got our own complex here, or not complex, but just space in a complex with our own private parking. When we got to, it's kind of in between. That's like 14 or 15 cars. But I think it's very dependent. Like if you're at a, what's it called? Like an apartment complex, and you have one space and there's not public parking, then like you probably have to look for a solution a little sooner. But looking for something close, like I would immediately just go far away, especially if you have a job, and a lot of people have daytime jobs. It really it's really dependent. Like if you have a house that can hold 10 cars, like go up to 10 cars and some, just have high utilization, so they're always moving. And Brandon says this. He said this a couple times, and I really like the thought. Don't create the solution until it's a problem. So if you have a problem with 4 cars and you need the space, then go figure it out. But if you're don't get into luxuries until you don't solve the problem until you have the problem. So I wouldn't think about it until like the HOA or neighbor, and that's what happened with my brother's house. Neighbors started complaining and giving us a piece of their mind, and so we kind of forced out, not forced out, but we kind of had to move. So I wouldn't worry about it until you have to worry about it. And you can have solutions before that becomes a problem. But that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and there's also some apps available, kind of like I guess like Airbnbs for houses. They have where you can rent people's parking spots.
Yeah, it's
People's like
neighbor.
lit neighbor, right? Neighbor, and then there's another one. Can't recall the name now, but you basically can rent like spaces in the front or in a garage, or
That's smart.
some are covered, some have security. So that's an option that maybe is even a little cheaper if you do need that extra space at some point.
Yeah, that's definitely a good option. We looked at that for a while too. We looked for spaces for months. I mean, we looked for a long time to find something. But if I would have gone back, I would say the hotel idea. I just love that idea. I know a couple of people that do it. And another thought on top of that is if you rent out spaces from a hotel, you have that partnership where they send you referrals and you send them referrals if anybody asks. There's possibility to rent out set up an additional partnership to say, okay, well, if I bring people to park their cars here, and maybe I can make a margin on it. So maybe instead of charging $75, we can charge $100, and then I get to keep the 25, or I get to keep the 30 or the 40 or something. So I think with that idea, or I guess any parking idea, there's ways for additional revenue, and that's what we do. I mean, we have 26 spots. We only use 22 cars, but they're not all used. So we rent out from any time 5 to 10 spaces, and it covers a good portion of the rent. So just an additional thought for people to solve and mitigate cost on parking if they're going to do that.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, so there's a question here about getting a hold of you, and you took care of that. So I don't know. Let's see. Charged Up Chronicle says, we do a hotel. We need to work a partnership for sure. Holiday Inn.
Okay, I
Yeah, and I
wouldn't.
have seen that.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, I don't know if you've talked to them or anything, but I wouldn't. It's funny how easy partnerships are. Like we have probably 10 hotel partners, and it's as easy as like we call them and say, hey, do you have any company that you refer for car rentals? And they say no, or they say yeah, we do, and then we'll try to nudge our way in between that. Like, okay, are they ever sold out, or they do delivery to the hotel for free? Like, we'll just find a way to get us in the door, and then typically the answer is no. They don't have anybody that they refer to as far as car rental places, and then we say, okay, cool. Can we drop off some business cards so if somebody comes by, you would hand them out. And the success rate on that is, I mean, amazing. But yeah, I'd try to set that up as soon as possible because I think that idea, because I've been spreading that idea. That idea is probably gonna expand, and people are gonna. I mean, who knows? Somebody could already be talking about hotels. So I'd probably jump on that sooner than later.
It's funny because I thought, well, why would anybody like want a car at a hotel if they're coming in from the airport? Like, wouldn't you want the car there? But I guess you're always still going to find people who like didn't like. In my case, I actually ran into that a few months ago where I had decided not to get a car, and then the last part of the trip I said, I'd probably need, and I actually had like a budget inside the hotel, and I was like, oh, okay, so here's one scenario where somebody may need it just for a day. But then I actually had a guest who requested delivery to a hotel, and the conversation came up eventually where I was like, we could have delivered to the airport. And he didn't. He's like, oh, this is the first time I'm using Turo, and so I didn't know. And so that, I guess, yeah, I guess there's still a lot of scenarios where that would still be. But even if you don't get that many, you're still able to make that partnership and hopefully get like free parking.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and
it's a
another
win. It's more of a win for you.
yeah, and another thought on top of that is most, not all, but most hotels have shuttles from the airport to the hotel to the airport. So you could even offer shuttles to the renters. And if you could do this, I don't know, logistics of this. I've never done this, but you could probably say airport delivery, like free airport, and then call the hotel the airport location, and then the shuttle is just part of the airport drop off or part of the airport process. And I know people that do that same concept with like their business. I know a handful of people that do this. Their business is not next to the airport. It's probably 5-10 minutes away, but they call that off as their airport location, and then they make their guests like Uber there. So just an additional thought.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy. But I had
Um,
one guest actually was texting, and he was like, I mentioned, no, you just like step out of your plane and you just go through the terminal and it's in the garage. And I actually had the conversation twice with him, and it wasn't, and both times he was like, oh wow, that's amazing. So I don't have to go anywhere. I'm like, no, it's parked right there.
wow.
I thought that was so funny. You get into all these like different like people are using Turo and they have like no idea how to do certain things, or they have no idea like they could get the card delivered right there to the airport. I thought that was funny. But so yeah, it showed that they're obviously still willing to kind of like take a shuttle and do whatever extra is needed.
Yeah.
Charge Up Chronicle says our hotel shuttles are customers from the airport to the car, included in our space fee.
I don't know how much you're paying for parking, but that's worth however much you're paying. Like that's sweet. And if you're charging for delivery fee or airport fee, or even if you're not, because you're getting additional customers to come in and additional revenue, like that's yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. That sounds good.
Right.
And
So we currently don't have any more questions. I don't know if you want to just keep our chat going.
$80 a car. I just saw that pop up. Wow, that is cheap. That is crazy cheap. We're paying. Oh my gosh, that seems crazy cheap. Um, let's pop up Ron's question.
Do you want to? So he says,
Oh,
is it a good idea to encourage your guests to not pick up from the airport so they can avoid the airport fees? If they booked at the airport, encouraging them to change.
um, well, we've only had. I mean, we only have like 1,200 reservations, including private. But in those reservations, we haven't had too many people complain. I can probably count one person that's had a problem with it because they didn't understand what the airport fee was. They thought we were charging that, and then we were charging delivery on top, so they thought they're getting double charged. But I don't know. I mean, if you have some sort of solution behind that, like if you, I wouldn't be parking cars at the airport and having them change the location and still doing it at the airport. I mean, not to say that you're going to get caught, but if you do get caught, it probably just wouldn't look good, and you'd obviously be banned from the platform immediately. But I don't know. That's a tough one. We don't do that. We don't encourage, because like if they don't have a problem with it, what's the point? What's the point in asking? But what's the point in solving a problem that's not a problem yet? So I'd say unless
And you're
somebody.
saying fees are the parking fees is what we're talking about? Are they
No,
different in
this is
or
reference to, so the airport charges a tax on top of the reservation. So like on there, they'll be charged a certain percentage of the reservation just for the airport fee. That's not the delivery fee. So sometimes, I mean, reiterating, but sometimes people won't like that. They wonder what that is. They'll think it's like an additional fee for delivery on top of the delivery. But for the most part, it's not. So I wouldn't worry about small logistics like that unless every single guest is like complaining about that. I wouldn't even think about that yet.
how much are those typically? Because I don't think I had noticed that. And I don't know if it's just different for different airports, but I guess I had never focused on.
Well, so Turo doesn't have contracts with certain airports. Like they're not allowed to go out of certain airports. So there's probably not a tax there because they don't have a contract with them. But the ones that they do, I don't know the percentage, but it's like, okay, the full reservation is $800. They charge X amount. And if I were to guess, it's probably 5 to 20%, somewhere in between there. I know that's a big spread, but they'll charge that on top and they'll immediately go to the airport. That's just their fee. They do the same for the big car rental companies. They charge a percentage for all the reservations booked.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I guess I had never noticed that and had never come up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know because I think one of the conveniences of probably the main convenience of Turo is that you get to like get right out of out of your flight and walk right up to your car. You don't have
Yeah.
to go to a counter. You don't have to wait 30 minutes in line. You don't have to deal with, oh, there's no cars. You're just walking right up to your car. Typically you're tired. The last thing you want to do is make a line and go somewhere else, get into a shuttle, wait for a shuttle, get in and out of, So I don't know. Again, I'm curious how much those fees end up actually being,
Yeah.
but I would say if I'm renting for Turo, like I would definitely personally would want that convenience,
Yeah.
and not having to like book and go somewhere else and take it,
Yeah.
and probably what you're taking an Uber, I guess, or we're talking about taking maybe a shuttle, or because if you're taking an Uber, then like in some places, like here in my area, it would defeat the purpose. You'd probably pay more for an Uber somewhere,
Yeah.
depending.
It's fair.
So Young William says, what is the best system for pickup and drop off? Meaning, should I meet the guest or develop a system where they can just pick up the key, etc.?
I'll give you both scenarios because it's three scenarios because it's either at their location, at the airport, or at your location. And there's different points for all of them. If it's at the airport, the only time we meet them is if they're already like at the train station, which is like we can just pull up to the curb and take photos because that's quicker than finding a parking spot and stuff like that. If they're not in, we'll always deliver the car early to the airport. So if the reservation's at 2, we'll drop it off at like 12 or 1. And we'll do contactless, like completely. I mean, we don't need to see you, and we'll do a lockbox on the window, which I highly recommend it. I mean, the people that sit around and wait for the people, that's just like a waste. I mean, if you're waiting for one person for 20 minutes times 20 cars times 500 reservations a month, or whatever that 200 reservations or 100 reservations a month, like. I mean, that number adds up too quickly. So on a smaller scale, I get the idea of like, oh, well, I want to be personal, but no, I wouldn't do that. Second option is meeting the guests at their location. They're almost always going to be at their location, so we always meet them in person. Like there's never a time we'll just drop off a car at someone's house and leave. We always will meet them. And then our location, we've been switching up a little bit on this. We used to do lockbox only when we started, and then Turo got mad at us and said no because something happened. I don't remember what it was. And then we went to always in person every single time somebody comes. And then recently we've gone to a mix, like depending on the time, depending on how busy we are, we will do a lockbox, but we'll make them send a selfie with their ID in front of them, kind of like the airport process, and do it that way. Lockbox in the window. We'll give you the pin once we get a confirmation of you holding your ID, which they kind of do with the ID process. But I want to see that person in front of my car with their ID before I give them the pin. So those are three solutions. Airport, you can do either one. Don't wait for guests, so just drop the car off and drop the lockbox. If it's at their location, we meet them every single time. And then if it's at our location, if you do right, you don't have to meet them. But I mean, it doesn't hurt to meet them. I mean, yeah, it never hurts to meet them for sure.
Yeah, we don't ever meet anyone. I think we've only met one, and it was because they wanted delivery to a hotel, and so you're literally like there's nowhere to park it. It's like down by the beach, and so like you're just like rushing to leave it near valet and meet the guests. I mean, there's really no other way. Sometimes we have delivered to a hotel where they had like parking, ground level parking or something like that. And so again, we'll just leave it there. But in my case, I don't have lock boxes. I use Turo Go. So where, it's the connected car. So like if you have like the Chevy app or like in my case, like the BMW app. And so you just connect it through the Turo Go with Turo, and the guest is able to, so that has eliminated the need for me to ask for the license, which was I also thought was annoying because you had to be there waiting for them to get there and then say, "Hey, show me the license." And so that was nice that I didn't have to do that anymore. Although lately they keep turning it on and off on me. So,
Yeah, I
but
don't know.
when it works, it is great.
Yeah, but most cars, I
The
mean,
guest is able to open.
yeah, but there's a lot of cars that don't have that. I mean, we didn't have that until like 6 months ago when we bought our first car that had it.
Yeah,
The,
the newer cars
yeah,
that have like the connected.
yeah. I mean, the only difference is you get more bookings. Like we've gotten a lot of Turo Go bookings. I don't know if it's more, but more people are booking with that option possibly. But I
Yeah,
still,
they probably have that as a setting.
yeah, I'll give you one final thought on this. Whether it's Turo Go or not, if somebody sends a selfie, let's say they land at like 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and they send a selfie a couple hours before, like up to 6 hours, because that's, I mean, any travel is going to be an extended period of time. If they send a selfie, if the delivery's at the airport, they send a selfie at a house, and the delivery is supposed to be at an airport, and it's not a local ID, that is always the biggest red flag ever. And every single time we'll say send a selfie in front of the car with your ID. And 90% of the time that happens, that specific situation, because that's happened probably 10 or 15 times with us. It'll be a Photoshop photo that they'll send back. We'll send it to Turo, and it's automatically no call, no show. So, and that's like you obviously can't really do that with Turo Go. They obviously have the ID verification now, but I would still I'd be very cautious about that, especially in a state and city like us where we're very close to the border and people are doing border runs like daily. So
Yeah, I was a little terrified when I first started because I would see all these stories. You go on Reddit and you see all these stories about my car got stolen on Turo Go. Don't use it. Don't use Turo Go. And I was really worried in the beginning, but like I said, it all depends on like what kind of cars you have, what area you're in. Again, I probably maybe will be a little bit more worried when I start getting a little bit more like local type cars where local renters are going to be renting them as opposed to like people flying in. And so I haven't had any negative situations thus far. I basically, like I said, just use Turo Go. Um, Turo handles and takes over the risk of vetting and making sure that they have their license and all that. I know now, actually, a few days ago, they also sent out a thing or a pop up. We probably all got it that says, "Hey, we're going to start. You no longer have to like do the license thing. We're going to do it for you and all that." Even with the regular non Turo Go, and I got that because Turo keeps turning off my Turo Go. But I had no issues. I basically just like Ron said, make sure you're using an RF blocking pouch. So I basically just put the key fob inside our Faraday bag that blocks the signal and just put it in the glove box. And then the guest comes in and just checks in, takes their pictures, and is able to unlock the car themselves right through the Turo app. Now, a lot of times there's not service in the airports, so just be aware that if you do that, you need to make sure you're available so that the guests, if I always let them know, hey, sometimes the app doesn't work very well, sometimes your signal is really bad. So if you get to the point where you need to unlock the car and you can't, just send me a message. And then I go into the, Chevy or BMW app or whatever, and I unlock it myself for them. And just to be safe in those instances, I have said, hey, can you just take a quick selfie of, your face and the license and right before I hit unlock, just as an extra precaution. You don't have to do it. Turo says you don't have to do it. So they're taking the risk and the liability, but just as an extra.
Yeah, I,
But yeah, definitely the meeting in person is like you said, if you have 20 cars, how could you possibly do that, you know?
no,
Oh,
yeah, a
here we
lot
go.
of, there's sometimes when we can, but a lot of the time we can't. It's just it's not worth the hassle. But I know people that like they'll just put the keys in the glove box and leave the car unlocked. So I don't know. I think when you get started, people are very technical and worried about the wrong things. Like stuff like that doesn't, I mean, it matters a little bit, but like you need to be worried about your net. I mean, figure out your revenue and your net and your cars that you're buying. That's a lot more important than like the little logistics. Like the process you can fix, but if you buy the wrong cars, it's like you own those. Like you can't fix that very easily. So I'd worry about the numbers more than the SOP and the systems or anything.
Well, and I think one like reason to consider like the whole, drop off thing is because it opens up the door. For example, if you absolutely had to meet guests and you had to do the key handoff, then you'd be limited because let's say you have a job, you have to be there 9 to 5. Now you're super limited to what times you can deliver. With these, contactless options, you're able to, let's say the car needs to be there at 7 in the morning, but you have to be at work at 8. You can drop off the car at 6 or at 5, or you can drop off the car the day before. So sometimes if I've dropped off the car earlier, like a lot earlier for my convenience, let's say the night before or 3 or 4 hours before where the parking is going to be a little bit more, I'll like leave cash, in the car. Or I'll go through the SunPass lane for the airport that lets you pay for the parking through SunPass. Because that way I always say that I don't want, I don't want the guests to pay $35 in parking for my convenience. So I have in the description that they're not going to pay over like $10. So if it ever does go over 10, I usually like leave them the balance or I'll reimburse them, at some point with the
Okay.
but it opens up the door for a lot of people who wouldn't otherwise be able to do Turo to be able to do it because you're leaving and picking up the car at your convenience. So
Yeah. There's two.
something to
Okay.
think about.
Quick thought on that before I jump to the next question. I have two thoughts on that. There's two ways you do airport delivery. You charge for delivery, and you pay for when you leave, and you still charge the guests when they leave. If they ask you to pay it, like you will, on top of what you charge for delivery. Or option two, and this is what we did tried it, but I don't know if I really like it, is you do free delivery and then you make them pay for the pickup and delivery. You make them pay for both sides of the parking. And I mean, sometimes it's only a couple bucks, but sometimes like if it's $14 one way and 14 the other, and I mean usually it's not, but they pay for it. I've heard of people doing both. The problem with the one which is free delivery and then they pay for the parking ticket is people won't want to pay. They'll say I don't want to pay for that. I don't want to do that. So I think what we found
Yeah, and I
is
think you have to have it. I think one of the rules, I think there's some like rules about you have to put it in the description if you're going to charge them for parking.
yeah, we did.
Um,
People still wouldn't want to pay.
yeah,
People just didn't
yeah,
want
that's a
to.
different story.
And then like
Well, I
arguing
pay for the begin,
about
or
it.
I pay for the for the when they leave. So because they just leave the parking ticket there, so I always pay for the exit parking.
That's
But
fair.
then they pay for the
Yeah.
entrance. But see, I couldn't in my case, I couldn't do that suggestion because I charge 115 to 120 for delivery
Holy
because
crap!
that's what it costs. What do you charge?
Like $40.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's definitely the market because
We have two airports. The one that's close, I mean, we're 8 minutes, 7 minutes down the street. We'll charge $40, and that's essentially like, okay, somebody goes there and they have to Uber both ways for the pickup and delivery. And then we have another airport that's like 45 minutes away, and we charge 110. But it's the same thing. I mean, the thought process behind ours is like we're not really making any money on the delivery. We're just paying for our costs if we had somebody
right.
that can actually do it. And then it's just the opportunity to get more bookings in those places because if people are going to book airport, they're not going to drive 7 minutes to your place. They want to get it at the airport. That's why they're paying extra. So that's just our quick thought process behind that.
Yeah, yeah. That's like the going price here. And it's because again, and I'm between two major airports and they're without traffic, probably 35, 45, and without traffic. It could be up to,
Gosh.
an hour. But the Uber trips are, anywhere between 30 and $60, depending on and typically like 40, with the tip. So each way. So I basically am right there. I have lowered it, and I think offer free delivery for like I think 2 or 3 weeks. But yeah, if I wouldn't be able to do it because I'd be basically that would be eating into the significantly into the revenue. It
Yeah,
would not make sense to be offering it on like 7 days or 5 days.
yeah. We took off free. We used to do free delivery for 3 days or more, but we don't. We charge delivery, no exception. Especially for the long. If I
If
mean, if it's a long ways and you have to pay, like it's not worth doing, unless it's
Yeah,
like a
if you're closer to the airport, you can probably get away, with being able to like not you could be one of those hosts that say, "Hey, free delivery all the time," and it probably will gain you some bookings, but you're able to do that because you're so close and it's costing you maybe $10 to get to and from the airport.
yeah. It's true. It's fair.
Let's bring up
I think
Young William says, "How big do you think Turo will be in the upcoming years? Will it be too saturated?"
a lot of good questions. I have a couple thoughts. I mean, when people are on Turo, like people come in quickly because it's getting saturated. People are coming in, but people are also leaving. I've talked to a lot of people that are just doing it wrong, and whether they're leaving right now because they're not making enough money, or they're just not realizing their depreciation, or buying their cars wrong. I mean, I could write you a whole list. People are leaving as well. So I think it is somewhat saturated in certain areas and is going to be saturated. But the way to avoid that, mitigate that, is by standing out, having good photos, good descriptions, and then also finding ways to creatively generate revenue outside of that. I don't think anybody in this business should forever stay just in Turo. I mean, there's just not, in certain places, like somebody just said, Turo's dead, New York. There's not enough
Mhm.
revenue. I mean, there's so much competition. Like in Phoenix, I'll give you an example. There's so much competition in the summer, which is our slow months. People are charging like $32 for a brand new Prius, it's sickening. So our solution to that, and you need to be coming up with solutions, is we do a lot of private rentals, and so we have a lot of partnerships with hotels and stuff, and then we run our own Google ads, and we mitigate that heavily. Like in our worst month on Turo, let me see real quick. I'll tell you what we did our worst month this summer, and then I'll tell you what we did privately to make up for it. So worst month ever, holy crap. In the summer, we did $4,600 for the month, which is like absolutely terrible. But we're able to mitigate it because we did private rentals, and let's see how much we did in private rentals. That's in July. Yeah, July here is like the absolute worst. We
And
did,
it's like you said, Turo's dead in New York, and then he said market is oversaturated.
yeah, and we did about 10 grand. We did about 10 grand in private rentals for that month. So I think if you just rely on Turo, a lot of those people are coming in and going to be leaving. But the people that are working outside the box and coming up with creative solutions, or going into private, I mean, they're leaving one way or the other. They're either going to go to private, or they're going to go and leave, or they're going to stay on Turo forever. Which I'm not too worried about market saturation for Turo, yes, but for market in general, as far as car rentals, I mean, I don't think so. As long as you stand out, I think you have a good
It's funny
chance.
because I saw an interview you had with I saw two different hosts that had like two differing opinions about the whole private, or I think you and I had talked about, would Turo ever want to like bring on the private, your private rental side? And then I know you talked to one of the hosts recently, and he said that he was absolutely like, oh, they definitely should allow you to have your like private rentals right on Turo, maybe get a little bit of the revenue. And then, so what do you still think? What are your thoughts about that now that you've
I mean,
heard like differing views? You still,
well, it would be a genius play for them, because the people that are moving to private like us, they're going to be able to control that revenue. Like it's leaving, and they're going to be able to re-tap in and recapture it. For the most part, some people are going to be like, all right, never mind. See, I'm not going to do that. I don't care what you're building. But I think I think it'd be a really smart idea. The only trouble is now they're adding on an additional step to a company that's pretty. I mean, they're not super hands off. They're somewhat hands on, but as far as like hands on in the process, I mean, like that would just be an added layer, and I just don't see them doing it. They did set up this program. They announced at the Powerhouse Summit that they're going to help people set up their Google My Business profile and connect it to their Turo. which is smart. I mean, that's not the same thing, but a similar idea to where they're pumping in additional impressions and people coming in, which is crazy because if there's, I don't know how many people on Turo, but if there's X thousand, 100,000 people on Turo and they get half of them or a quarter of them to build Google business profiles to funnel people in to look at their listings, I mean, yeah, that's smart. But I can't imagine them getting into private. The logistics behind it would just be like, it'd just be a nightmare.
I mean, it would basically just be like them paying you a referral fee for you bringing in your own. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, because if they're still doing their,
yeah, but that's kind of what it is right now. Like they're giving you the referral fee or control over the referral fee, but then they're charging I guess there's just more of a service fee right now.
Right, because like, I mean, one issue would be, okay, they let you bring in so you can have private guests come in and book directly from you. So you'd be getting the full revenue minus whatever fee they're going to charge you because you brought in the client. But then, and then one thing they would have to make sure is like, okay, if somebody booked on Turo, if one of your guests booked through Turo, they could never be a private guest because then that's one way to eliminate for example, you saying to all your to all the Turo hosts, hey, come through the private side, but they can clearly just see like, okay, if you've been a Turo guest before, you can now not be Max's like private guest, to avoid Turo fees. That's one way they could limit, the. But at the end of the day, it's basically just them saying, hey, I'll give you a referral fee if you brought in the client.
Yeah.
So it's really just because I mean, I do think that there's just a lot of like additional, and again, I've seen your interviews where one host they have totally differing views on this, where one is like, absolutely, we'll never do private, like, because there's so much more, work and risk that's involved. But then you have others that think differently, and like you seem to really be like digging the whole private.
Yeah. There's a lot of reasons. I mean, there's a lot of reasons we went into private, but I think Turo scares me a little bit. I mean, like if they decide to shut your account down one day, or if they go bankrupt and they go out of business, or I mean, there's so many what ifs that you're leaving in their hands. And like you could have the most successful business on Turo, you could be making so much money, but it doesn't matter. I mean, you're really at the mercy of another company. So I don't like that. I like the idea of controlling the clients, controlling the market, controlling the customers, controlling the process, controlling the revenue. I mean, you have so much control over everything, but giving up that process as I go on, I realize that it's harder and harder to do. Turo tried that and stopped. They had a commercial host program for private fleet that could provide proof of insurance at a 90 take. They killed it almost 2 years ago. Okay, so they
Remember that, yeah.
You remember that? I don't think I remember that.
That's when I first talked to you, I had mentioned something like that, and this is what I was talking about. That's why I was asking you like what commercial insurance you had because it was this. But yeah, they did kill it, but I'm trying to think if that's so.
So if they, I mean, if they tried it and it didn't work out, then obviously there's some logistics either they couldn't figure out or didn't make sense. So I don't know. I mean, well, okay, think about this. Okay, so think about okay, so if you get 90% of the reservation, then they take 10%. So they're making 10% revenue or 10% off of revenue. But think about it right now. They're getting young driver fee, you don't see that. They're getting insurance, which they mark up. They're getting any insurance stuff. So like I would assume that they're getting this. I don't have confirmation, but if you're doing like a loss of rental, depreciated asset, which is I forget what it's called. I don't know. I forget what it's called. But then they're also making additional driver. They're making, I mean, the added on, and then they're making their trip fee, which is usually sometimes the same cost as that. So they're making usually 2 to 3 times what you're making. So it's kind of like, do we want to make 66% of the reservation in total or 50%, or do we want to make 10%? So I from this standpoint of them, whoever this is, put in this information, that makes sense. I mean, from any
amazing feats.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
From
so
that standpoint, that makes sense.
But if I remember correctly, so in this in with this scenario, it was that you had to have it. So you had to have your cars, you had to have an LLC, and you had to have your cars under an LLC, and you had to have your own commercial insurance. And so, and again, this is, if I could be wrong about some of this, but this is what I kind of remember. And so you were still handling like your insurance aspect of it. It's just that you were doing everything else through Turo, and they would still be taking 10%. Um,
The
I
logistics
think
behind
it would maybe be a little bit different. You wouldn't have your own insurance. It would everything would still it's basically like right now, let's say I go and I create a Google ad, right? And somebody contacts me through that phone number, or clicks my, whatever website I put on there or whatever. And if that comes in to Turo, Turo should give me sort of like a referral fee. So I think that would then create a thing where it's different from this. It wouldn't be like me still having to like handle claims on my own, have my own insurance. It would be like, hey, Turo, I brought this client in. This is my private client that came in through my, going out and running around and word of mouth, or maybe, cards or ads that I placed. And so why don't you give me like a little fee for it?
yeah.
And I'm also charging. I guess there's also the part about charging the fees that I would want. Like, this is what I'm charging them. Here's your fee. Yeah, I guess it would be backwards. Here's what I'm charging my private client. Handle all the other stuff that you handle for everybody else, and here's the fee.
Well,
Something like that.
in that scenario, that not only do they lose revenue, but they lose control. I guess they get control of the customer data, but then it's also it's bad from a customer standpoint, because the only difference between you and them, I guess maybe you get their insurance, maybe that's the added benefit, but you're giving up, like, now you're giving away that customer, because that customer could rebook on Turo with somebody else's car. Like, they do not have to book through you. But when you own the information to your customer database and can recontact them and retarget them, I mean, that alone, that single piece is worth so much money. I mean, it's worth a ton. So
Yeah, but you're charging them less than the Turo. You're not adding on all those extra Turo fees. So essentially, they probably wouldn't want to go to Turo. I mean, unless they just want a specific car that you don't have, and that's just.
I guess, I don't know. I can see it from both points. I can't imagine. I don't know, the mitigation. Two reasons: they couldn't get large enough fleets. Well, I mean, if you look at with quality vehicles, if you look at who the demographic is for Turo, majority of people have small fleets. Like, I don't know the actual numbers, but we're at that Powerhouse Summit, and it was like most people have like 2 to 3 cars or something. Like, that is the Turo demographic. That is who the main hosts are for Turo. Their user retention. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that idea is tough. I think there's probably a lot of reasons it didn't work, and maybe they're revisiting this idea, because I've heard about a lot of people wanting this concept, which I don't understand, because as a host and for myself, I think I can make a lot more revenue myself, and I don't know why I'd be giving up that opportunity and what I'd be getting in its place. I mean, maybe the vetting process that they have in place, but you can build something like that yourself. Maybe the marketing. So I'm just not sure why an individual would be giving up that. You vet by asking questions. That's how we have our vetting system. There's people, or you can do like background checks and stuff for people, but there's costs and stuff associated. I mean, if you're paying $25 for a background check to vet somebody, and you eliminate like 50% of the people that are going to rent, like, the amount of money that it's costing you to do something like that, to actually set up a proper vetting system, is really expensive for a smaller size fleet. So we ask questions. We have, I'll just give you the main basis of our questions. First is, do you have car insurance? And from that, we have a couple different options on where we're going to go. If they do have insurance, if it's full coverage, we'll rent to them privately. If they have liability, we'll typically kind of feel it out to determine whether we want to rent to them privately and sell them full coverage insurance or not. Or if they have no insurance, like, we won't even touch it. Reason being is, when people don't have any insurance, it's a little bit sketchy. I mean, there's reasons people don't have insurance, and it's kind of you don't really want to mess with that. Next question is, are they staying local just because we have a limited amount of miles we have on our cars? Next question is, what's the next question? I'm forgetting my whole vetting. It's so natural, but I'm forgetting it for what we ask. Next is, we always ask about card payment type. A lot of people that are, again, this is all kind of just the sketchy people doing bad things. The sketchy people want to pay with like a refillable card, and we don't allow that. So we have to make sure it's a major debit card or credit card from a major bank. Like if they come in with some like weird, we get a lot of people with like Cash App cards or whatever the hell those are. And the problem with it is if you go to charge that customer, if you go to like sue that customer, based on the information from that card, like you don't have anything. Like those aren't attached to an individual a lot of the time, especially refillable cards. But I was just explaining my vetting process for private rental. Somebody said you vet by asking questions, which is true. So I was explaining some of the questions that I asked to do the vetting process for our system.
Yeah, so that's just a whole very curious what the future of that will be, whether they're going to try to stay away from it, they're going to try to gain some of that market.
I wonder. Yeah, I mean they did that initial push of the Google business profiles, but I wonder how much farther they will go from that. I'm just not sure. I guess we'll see. Yeah, and I think from what I've seen, at least I've talked to a lot of hosts, I've interviewed a lot of people. There's not a lot of people in my phase. Like I'm kind of in between Turo and private. Like I have 20 to 30% private, and then the rest of it's on Turo, and we're kind of phasing into private. But usually when people make the jump ship, they'll go 100%. Like there's not a lot of people in this phase, and when they go to private, they usually won't come back, or they'll start private. So I don't know. It's kind of an interesting thing right now. But anybody that's on Turo, I'd highly recommend at least look into private. I mean, just for yourself. I mean, if you can get even an additional booking every month, like that's huge.
I just feel like it's like I would feel like it's so much more work that you have not thought of, right? Like answering the phones, I mean now you text, the guests, but I feel like the phone rings and you need to answer it, as opposed to now where you're just kind of responding to a text. It's not as like they have Turo they can call, right?
Yeah, they still. I mean,
No.
that's the same thing. If a customer is gonna call you, they're gonna call you. That's true. That's true. There is additional steps you have to do, and the main ones are the calls that you get and vetting that, which you can eliminate. I mean, it all depends on how you run your ads. Like we'll get a lot of people that book on our website, but we set our ads to call because I want to vet them on the phone. I want to hear their voice. I want to hear how they sound. I want to hear how they respond to certain things. So we add extra work. When you could run ads just your website, you can have books straight through your website. You don't have to talk to anybody. So you can eliminate that, but we don't want to. I want to make sure I vet my customers. And then the other thing that.
But do you have like an 800 number that they would call? Because I feel like if you're doing it private, you would have to have that extra service, right? Or
we have a Google Voice. So we have like a company number, and it goes to my brother, and it goes to myself, and any employees that we have working. So we kind of do. And then the only other thing though that you have to do on top of Turo that you're not already doing is calling to verify insurance. But other than that, like that's really it. And then and then setting up the process in the beginning, like setting up the website, setting up your insurance, setting up the HQ rentals. But that's just the building for the beginning.
well, and what about the situations where, for example, I think you talked about this in one of your interviews, where a host had to go and pick up the car from like Vegas or something. And they had left the car there. Like, how do you handle situations like that? Are you able to do like a deposit that would cover that sort of stuff, or are you going to eat that? That's the other part that is kind of.
That's very dependent on the situation. Yeah, it's very, very dependent. Like we've had, trying to think of a situation that we've actually ran into that would be plausible. I mean, our biggest vetting question, they're all like crazy important, is are you traveling locally? And sometimes people lie, but a lot of the time on that specific question, I don't know why, the way we ask it, they'll tell the truth. And if somebody's going to like Texas, or if they're going to go like 1,000 or 2,000 miles away, I usually don't care how long they have the car for. I just won't rent them. I don't want my cars that far away. I don't want that many miles put on my car. So the only situations that we have are typically local, but we have had Turo problems far away, and those would be tough. I mean, we do take deposits, but if it's like, okay, well, the car has to get towed, that's a cost. there's a pop tire, that's why they had to stop. Okay, that's a cost. I mean, I'm not sure because the deposit only goes so far. Like if you charge $250, that's a tire right there, or that's not even a tow. That couldn't even. I mean, that wouldn't even get you, 100 miles or whatever the amount is. So, I guess I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. But there's a lot of give and take. Like there's situations where you will lose revenue for certain instances. Like one guy, he cracked a windshield, and the windshield was like $300, and his insurance deductible was $500. So at this kind of weird limbo, and let me think, his deductible was like $250 for that, or deposit that he paid us was $250, but he had some extra charge. Like we had to pay like $50 in gas. We had $200 left, and we had another like $180 for the glass. And he wouldn't pay it. He said, I'm not going to pay for that, which is crazy. So we had to eat it. I mean, there's really no solution, but I mean, luckily that was like a 1 month rental at like a lot more revenue than what we normally make. Like we made probably, I mean, in that 1 month we probably did like, it's probably 3,500 when typically that car would do like $2,000. So, I mean, that's kind of part of the give and take. Like sometimes you have to be willing to make sacrifices, but they typically balance out in your favor because you're already making so much more revenue that it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. I guess it's not like you're always going to have these situations that are going to be insane. You're not always going to have to pick up your car on a tow truck from Vegas,
Yeah, it's
I guess that's the scary part.
Yeah. And I guess, I mean, we've had to go get cars. Like if somebody's not paying or something, we're always able to we've done that a couple times. Like if somebody doesn't pay and they're not contacting us, like we'll go get the car. But that's pretty rare. So, there's added stuff you have to do with private rentals, but there's obviously a lot more benefit than there is cost and time or money, or whatever.
Ron is saying that the stream is frozen. I'm so sorry. I've had such issues with my camera today. This is the third time, and I'd never had issues before. And today, when Max is finally sitting down with awesome audio and video, then I have to go mess it up. But somebody says it's frozen. Is it still frozen? All good now. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that.
Let's talk about some seasonality. What do you do about like slow season for your cars?
So I've actually, like I said, I started last year, like really as a business, because I did it in the past, but it wasn't like, I was just renting cars that were sitting there. But so I really haven't been exposed to like multiple seasons, like where I can see the trend year over year. But I guess in my market, there really hasn't. I'm trying to think of when I just saw my revenue per month. I want to say like February was a little low, and then I hear other hosts talk about, oh, October is the lowest month of the year in revenue. And I remember I got my car in August. And so October, I was freaking out because I posted it in October. I listed in October and I was like, oh, great. And that wasn't the case for me. Like October got booked in 2 weeks, and it's been booked like pretty solidly. I mean, so I guess because of my market, South Florida, you have constant tourism. So I guess I don't really have that. We don't have snow. I guess there's probably a month or two that it tends to be a little, but yeah, I can't. Summer was great. The holidays were great. So I know you have, right? You have like, is summer?
Yeah, summer sucks. But we're just, I mean, there's a couple solutions to the slow seasons because everybody has at least some sort of slow season. You're going to find it. But our solution right now, as we're going to come into summer, is we're obviously going to do a lot of private rentals. We're going to do Uber programs to have a flat line on revenue for part of it. And then we're also going
I want to ask you about that after.
Talk about that.
Once you're done with this, yeah, I'm curious about.
And then we are going to be moving, this is our plan as of right now. I mean, things could change, but we're going to be moving some cars up to Flagstaff. It's about 2 hours north, but the revenue in summer supposedly is double. So if we make 2x the revenue in Flagstaff and still have a private system or private something set up there, I mean, I'll take the free revenue any day, especially for a 2 hour drive. That's our thought right now. And people will move. I mean, I've heard about people. My buddy Brandon, he has a big fleet, and he has like 10 cars coming from Canada, just for the winter, because winter they don't get any rentals, but here we do. So that's a solution. You just have to calculate it. Like, we looked at the numbers to go to Denver, and it didn't make sense. But maybe going a little closer makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely places like when we traveled to like the Northeast, there were probably like 3 restaurants open in the entire town. Everybody else had closed and they had all come down to Florida. So so there's definitely, places that like you do have to certainly look into the seasons. But I think like, yeah, I'm looking right now at my Turo earnings for the year, and it's basically pretty, like I said, February was a low month. That one car just had $500, but the rest, all the other months have been from 1,500 to 1,900 a month. February and October, like I mentioned, I guess October is one of those. People are back to school in September, kids, and so maybe October, and then November picks up again with the holidays. So yeah, it's kind of pretty averaged out.
Wow, that's
You want to bring up some
yeah.
of these questions have come in. So only the real estate says what cars you get and what's your market. And Andres, oh, I'm sorry. So this is they're having a conversation because Andres had mentioned had made a comment about not getting into Turo, and so they're just kind of going back and forth on their thoughts. So we'll go to Damian Cruz. He says, been thinking of doing Turo rentals. I currently rent my fleet of 8 cars through legal law firms. Main issue if has been running into is insurance. Was thinking of Lula, I'm assuming is what he meant. Is there any other suggestions?
Yeah, there's a ton. I'll give you just a couple quick ones. I've never heard of renting to law firms. That's crazy. I'd love to hear more about that for sure. There's
Yeah, especially I've been working with law firms for 22 years, so that'd be interesting. I do know that one of the firms I was in, they had like their own fleet of cars. So they had like a few Suburbans just sitting in the back.
Yeah, I've heard
for
of
like
that.
clients. But yeah, I never heard of like renting it from. So that's interesting.
The top 3 that I know of are Lula, GMI, and ABI, but you can also go to the major companies like Liberty Mutual, State Farm. I don't know. I mean, if you find the top companies, they'll typically have programs for car rentals. You kind of have to dig around and make the right calls, but they do. So those are the major 3 car rental ones, and then of course the major ones in most cities are going to have some sort of program for rideshare, or this isn't rideshare, it's car rentals.
Yeah, I'm just curious what I'm just trying to think. So he's been renting his 8 cars and running into insurance. So I'm guessing because you've been trying to have like personal insurance. So the whole thing we've been talking about insurance, is that what you think he means?
Yeah, that's what it
See if he
sounds
wants to.
Well, because personal policies, you can typically only have so many cars on it. My mother works for a law firm specializing in vehicle accidents. I guess can say that I'm like an enterprise. Yeah, just get fleet insurance. Just look. I mean, if you look up fleet insurance, I'm sure you'll find a list of a couple. But yeah, that's interesting for sure.
Yeah. So let's bring up. Yeah, and again, I guess so. He said so there's different things though, because if you're doing it through Turo, then you're gonna want to do like the Turo insurance and then the Lula insurance, but then you may, because you're also doing private, I'm guessing you have commercial, which in that case you could just stick with commercial insurance. But if you're running into issues, it sounds like he has personal insurances. So then you could just, instead of doing like a Lula like Turo policy, you could just do like what you have, right? The full commercial policy.
Yeah.
So that's the other option.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so let's what?
That's hilarious.
Not that. Okay.
That's a good one, Brody. It's hilarious.
Yeah, we don't know about that. So Ron says, I'm in the Phoenix area. Just actually, we already did. No.
Uh,
So just started up in November. Been doing pretty good. I'm using Turo pricing because I have no idea what to charge. I know spring is coming. Should I
oh
continue with Turo pricing?
Ron, I hope to God you know how many bookings January, February, March. Here's what we did. We did January and February. We did about 2 times what we normally charge. So if it's like 40 or $50, we'll do 80 or $100 per day for Jan Feb. And then in March is like the craziest month in Arizona and Phoenix specifically. So we did like 2.5 to 3 times price. And the idea behind that is like, I mean, we have minivans going for like $199 a day, and people most likely aren't going to be
Is this
renting those
through
cars.
Turo? Through
Yes,
Turo too?
private, we have the prices like crazy high. But the idea is this: if somebody books it, great. Like we just made an insane amount of money that we probably shouldn't have made that much. But if they don't, we can always lower prices as we get closer and still book them for higher rates. The idea is like if you get a booking that far in advance for a low amount, like that sucks. And we just had, I mean, I'll give you an example. We just had a booking last night for like 25 days for it's a 17, we have a, what is it, Jeep Renegade, and they paid $99 a day and they paid $100 for delivery, which is like crazy. Set that pricing super high, but somebody actually paid it. And that's an example of set your pricing super high for their super busy months in advance. If somebody books it, great. If somebody doesn't, you slowly lower pricing until you get that utilization. But honestly, most of the reservations that we get are like a couple days in advance, like a week in advance at the most. We won't have a fully booked calendar for the next month ever. It's always short and kind of last minute. But I'm going to let you talk about the South Florida market being saturated. I'm just going to run. I'll be right back real quick.
Sure. Yeah, and there's just a few things we wanted to when he comes back, we'll just touch up on with regard to that. So Jesus says, Santos says, would people consider South Florida saturated? I think so. I mean, there's a lot of cars. The prices are extremely low. I remember back in the day where, a Suburban would rent for like 120, 115, and now, you're seeing them for 70. If you look at Turo's recommended pricing, the low is like $45, which is insane because I mean, I can't imagine a situation where I would ever rent a Suburban out for $45. I do lower it, like what Max was saying, as it gets closer. If maybe you have a week and a half in between that's not rented, and you want to just, you're like, let's just lower it a few dollars to maybe beat out, someone else in that booking. But to lower it that much is kind of ridiculous. But I have seen, so I guess yeah, you could say that it's pretty saturated. But again, like it all goes back to, if you have the good pictures, if you have good, good service, good reviews, then, you could probably kind of always stay above, and be like I said, I bought this in my example, I bought that one car last October and it's been pretty booked consistently. I think it's only been maybe 4 weeks out of the year, 4 to 6 weeks maybe, where it wasn't rented. Um, it's been, and right now, to touch up on what we mentioned earlier, right now I have bookings January, February, March, and April. So I guess it varies. It depends on your market. There's just so many variables with this. Let's see. So Ryan Allen says, jumping on a little late, what do you do with your insurance right when you buy a car? You need insurance to register the vehicle, but Lula doesn't cover until posted on Turo. Yeah, I actually had that situation recently. I actually ran into a situation where, um, hey Max, you're back. So can you hear us?
Yep.
So I had just started reading. Ryan Allen says, jumping on a little late. What do you do with your insurance right when you buy a car? You need insurance to register the vehicle, but Lula doesn't cover until posted on Turo. And I was mentioning I actually had just run into this situation when I recently traded my car in, and because my car had been on Lula this whole year, even though I hadn't posted it. When you go to try to get insurance at the dealership to be able to leave with a car, it asks you, you have to add on, you have to get a policy, and it has to be obviously a personal policy because they're not, you're not going to want to show them that it's a commercial policy that you're there to get a car that you're going to go put on Turo. So I actually freaked out because I tried Progressive, I tried Geico, I tried all of the, personal, and they all ask you, okay, well, what insurance do you have? And I didn't know what to answer because I couldn't say Lula. I don't even think it was like an option there. And so I would sort of like skip that part or try to like skip through it, and I would get to a point where it would say, "Okay, well, sorry, we can't offer you a policy." And I almost had to tell the dealership, like, "Hey, I have to come back tomorrow because I have to figure this out," without being able to, without telling them what the issue was. Um, but ultimately, I kind of just there's a part where it says, "What's your policy? What's your insurance? What's your policy?" I just kind of was able to just put in gibberish. Like I just put in, I don't know, like NA or something, and then I just put in a blank policy number or something like that, and it went all the way through and gave me my policy, so that I can leave the dealership with the car. But yeah, I mean, these are things that like I wonder how other people are, are doing these sort of things, because insurance companies don't want you to be. They want to know that you've had insurance, that you haven't had a lapse in insurance. Um, these are the things they look at. These are the things they look at when they offer you, rates as well. So I'm curious what in your case, you're different because you have commercial insurance, so you don't
I'm
go
different,
through
but
this.
I have a thought behind it. The people that I know, and that we do this too, they will list the car on Turo before they even have it. So, because you usually know what kind of car you're buying, and you usually have an idea of like the exact car you're buying at least somewhat in advance. So we'll always do this. We'll list the car like before we buy it, because we know we're going to buy a car at auction, and typically we can't pick it up for like a 6 hour window. So we'll list it. We'll just make it unavailable. So if we buy a car and it's not
But doesn't it
available,
ask for the VIN? I'm trying to remember.
the VIN, yeah. Well, you have that. I mean, no matter where you buy it, you're going to have the VIN. Whether you buy it private, you can ask the individual. Whether you buy it from a dealership, they have that on their site. Or we buy it from auction, we have all that. So I mean, we and everybody I know that are big hosts list the car beforehand, and then I mean, you wouldn't even run into this because then it's already listed on Turo, and then you set a gap for, I know I'm not going to get the car for this period of time. Just set a gap, and then you can have bookings for the future and already have it on Turo. And then for photos, because you're probably not going to have photos, dealership photos or the photos that you already have, like that if somebody posted it for sale or something, you can either use like manufacturer photos or the photos that they used when they posted it, like private, for example.
Okay, yeah. So I guess I answered like a different side of the question. They were more asking that Lula doesn't cover. Yeah, so I guess I hadn't. Yeah, because I hadn't. In my case, it's like you just go buy the car, you put the personal insurance to be able to get it out of the dealership, and then I've always just listed it and
Yeah,
then added on the Lula and changed it.
yeah,
So
but I mean,
I
it's not
guess
like you're walking into a dealership like this. Like, you're not walking into a dealership not knowing what you're gonna buy, right?
sometimes. No, no.
What?
No, and in my case, it was my personal car I was trading in,
Oh,
so
but
obviously I knew exactly
but
what I wanted. No, but I mean, this insurance thing was something to think about, because again, if you haven't had personal insurance for a while, and you're having to put personal insurance on a car to get it out of the dealership, again, in your case, it doesn't matter because you're using the commercial policy, so you're
yeah,
just putting a commercial policy on it.
we're a little different for sure. But even, I mean, one last thought is like while you're at the dealership, it takes so long to go through the process. I've only been through it like once or twice, but to buy and finance a car, it's like a half day or full day process. So like you can like list it on Turo, even if you're not 100%, you can always list it and then just delete it if you don't end up getting it. So there's, that's what I would do at least if I
Well,
were.
here's another thought about that though. When I think it was, yeah. So obviously, these car salesmen, they kind of, you can pretty much tell them like what you're doing. They're just like, don't tell the bank, but I did mention like, oh, the whole Turo thing, and he said, hey, hold off for like 2 weeks until we get funded. And so I actually kind of like freaked out this time and didn't do it because of those stories, like what we like. Have you heard? I know I've heard of people, for example, with Ally Bank, saying that Ally Bank has actually like wanted to, um, they can't repo your car, I don't think, and I don't think I've seen concrete evidence of that, but they can. I mean, it does state in your lease agreement that this is not for commercial purposes.
Oh,
So
you're talking about a lease. Lease
no,
is
no, no,
different.
not lease, per a finance agreement. I just said lease, but in your finance agreement. Yeah, I mean, even actually, even if you look at like if I had to look at my gap at my gap policy right now, it specifically says not for commercial uses. So technically, if I were to get into an issue where I needed my personal gap to cover, they can come back and say, nope, this
Wait,
is
wait,
not for first.
back it up. Why do
Yeah,
you
there's
have
just a bunch of
your gap insurance isn't for rentals, right? Why do you have gap insurance?
because you have to. What do you mean? So for your personal coverage, you have to have your personal coverage. Right? But see,
Oh,
it's
that's
different for you because you have commercial. You
yeah,
have
that's fine.
full
That,
commercial, which hopefully
but that's
my next
rental.
cars are going to be under the LLC.
But that's just an insurance policy. That's not gap. Gap would be gap's different because you have the
Right,
insurance is
right.
for
Gap is to cover the yeah, but like so let's say for example, I have a car that, we have it on Turo. It's being paid through Lula or if insured through Lula or my personal, let's say. If I were to crash the car on my own during my time, I'm responsible. And let's say there was that gap needed to cover, right? And I went to them, hey, you're liable for these $2,000, $3,000. They can actually come back and say, well, wait a minute, your car, whether even though it wasn't during a rental period, just like the insurance could say, we're not going to cover you, we're not going to pay because we know you rent your car on Turo, even though they're not paying for a rental period, right? Even though that same thing, they can come back and I've heard where they've done that, and it's clearly says it not for commercial, so they can come back and say, nope.
this is with Lula you have?
So this is not
Oh,
related to Lula. This is just
oh,
separate, like the
oh,
idea of gap. And it's because they don't and it goes back to because for example, the logic behind it is that if you are renting your car, you're doing Uber, whatever, your car's going to depreciate a lot more. You're going to be putting a ton of extra miles on it, extra, wear on it. And so that gap is going to be bigger, right, than typical. So gap is now going to have to cover, let's say, $4 or $5,000 instead of $2,000 difference, right? So
mm,
that's why they can come back and say, well, no, you didn't have that little checkbox that says commercial allowed, which like in my case right now, it doesn't. So that's one thing the next cars I'm putting under an LLC, so hopefully I can start moving away from all of these, and just get full commercial. But
yeah,
but these are things that when you don't have that, these are all these little things that come up and, you deal with and have to,
yeah.
make sure you
A question. I don't know if you know the answer to this, but whenever we go to the MVD to title a car, because we get the title and then we have to transfer it, they ask us. Well, not they don't always ask us, but they have asked us if it's for commercial or for I don't know. I don't know. I don't think the other word's residential, but if it's for commercial use or if it's not for commercial use. And the difference was they didn't give me a good explanation, but they said that it's just the name the name of it, which obviously can't be right, and then commercial costs more, and then there's some other stuff, but I don't know if
this
you
is
have
for when you do what? The registration?
when you buy when you register your car when you're transferring the title, whether you want it in commercial use or the other one. I don't know if it's personal or private or something, but
Personal. Yeah, it's
yeah,
a personal.
we did personal for all of them because they said it sounded like to them or to us, it sounded like commercial was only for vehicles that towed over X pounds, like towed over 6,000 pounds. That would be for commercial use. And we told them about the car rental. We have these are for car rental, and they said, "Well, you could do either one. It doesn't matter." And I was like, "Oh, that seems weird."
Oh, because maybe that's more like the trucking type, right? Like
That's what it
commercial
sounded
the big trucks or semi
like.
trucks or that. Maybe that's like a whole nother different like
That's what it sounded like.
commercial area. Because
I'm just not sure. And I know that like Hertz and Enterprise and them they will do. I'm pretty sure they have commercial stuff. I don't know what it is because they have perm plates. They have permanent plates on this. They don't have expiration dates on their plates. They're permanent, so they can practically rent them out forever and never have them expire. Essentially, is what I've understood.
there's so many things to look into when you're doing all of this. Hopefully, because some of these comments are kind of like responding to others, so hopefully I'm not like bouncing all over the place here. Um, all my cars, so Damon says all my cars are under my personal insurance. So the issue I'm having is trying to expand. My insurance doesn't want to allow me to add more cars, so I'm looking to get some type of commercial policy.
Oh yeah, we ran into that same situation. They wouldn't let us. They wouldn't let us add any more cars. We hit the limit, and so I mean, we just switched. We went to GMI. GMI. There's Lula, and then there's a couple others. But yeah, make the jump. It's probably cheaper than, well, I guess it's probably cheaper than what you're paying right now, because ours right now is a lot cheaper than what it was with having your personal insurance. And personal insurance is for like you're driving it all the time. You're putting 12,000 miles a year on average, 12 to 15,000. But when you're renting it on like a car sharing platform, you're driving like little to none. So really, the liability for the insurance companies is very little. That's why it's cheaper. But yeah, I just make the switch. Just do it.
But I'm curious, Damien, if you can say so what state you're in, because you're saying you have them all under personal insurance, but they're being rented out. Do they know that they're being rented out?
I hope so.
Because yeah, I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I really hope,
Um,
hope they know.
and then Naki Mist says you can list a car without insurance. Once listed, you can get Lula, and so that's in response to the conversation we were having um,
Yeah.
in the back. And just before we go into the next one, I just wanted to mention, because right before you left, you were talking about how um, you typically get, most of your bookings are like right up front. And I was just looking at my like bookings for 2024, and right now I have a few bookings January, February, March, and April. So it kind of varies, it varies like the market, the car.
I have bookings in those months.
Hmm.
Let's
Yep.
see. I'm gonna show you ours.
Yep. I have $3,500 in upcoming bookings,
Oh, okay.
January through April,
I
like
guess
4 trips, I think.
we have a couple as well. We have 2,600, but we probably have like two bookings. Like we really don't have. I mean, like one's 1,600, and then if it's 2,600, like yeah, the other one's probably one booking for $1,000. But yeah, that's like rare. I've never seen us have January, February, and March like that far out in bookings. It's pretty rare for us. It's a lot of our bookings are last minute.
So let's see. What do you wanna answer now?
Uh,
Let's see. This one's kind of like related to what we were talking about. Carl says to fix that, you have to purchase those vehicles under your business no matter what. There is a difference in gap for personal and business. That checkbox is key. Yeah. And then the next is commercial gap typically $100 or more than the average cost at the dealer. Yeah. The issue, you know, I I would have I want to always do everything like as you should be doing it. Like I don't want to ever run into any situation. However, the reason why I didn't want to mention that at the dealership and add that commercial checkbox on is because then you run into this, potential issue where that I've heard where like the lender could say, yeah, no, we're not giving you the car to go put it on Turo because that's gonna depreciate significantly. We don't want any of that. And I have heard, I mean, I've read, and I don't know how valid it is, but I've read where Ally Bank, which is funny, is my bank, for the car, that they've actually, I don't know. I don't know what they've actually done with it, but that supposedly they were one of the banks that were like being fussy about, cars being on Turo. And then, like I said, I mentioned it to the salesman, and he's like, "Hey, just give it 2 weeks before, once we get funded, then they can't like back out because I guess they have the ability to back out
See,
and maybe he's seen it happen."
I don't understand it from a financial situation or standpoint, because if somebody rents the car out and they get in an accident, I guess I can see it from one standpoint of, okay, Turo pays for it, but obviously if you overbought the car, if you paid too much money for the car, Turo's not going to pay for that. Like you just took a
You're
loss.
saying the gap, or you're saying
Oh no, I'm talking about. I'm just referring to why banks wouldn't like the idea, like why we wouldn't get funding for cars that are gonna go on Turo. And my thought
well, it's
with it,
probably because of the depreciation, because you're putting so much wear and tear on the car. You're putting so much more miles. So if they repo the car 6 months into it, they're gonna have triple the mileage that a person using it for personal reasons could have, right?
it's true. But also, I was thinking about if you overpay for a car, and typically at dealerships, that's what you do, and it gets in an accident and they only pay you X amount. So let's say it's a $20,000 car, they pay you $15. There's a $5,000 margin. There's $5,000. Like, where's that coming from? I would think that the percentage of defaults on those loans would highly increase for those type of situations. And like, without doing rideshare or whatever this is, they're not going to run into that situation. But because they are, that's a higher possibility. And then of course the depreciation if they do have to repo it, and because people default, like, yeah, they're worth a lot less money and they want to recoup as much value as they can. So I'm sure both those are high possibilities.
Yeah, I haven't seen like any actual concrete evidence. Just like I said, like what I saw with Geico the other day. I mean, that was like somebody was telling me that it happened to them, a week before or whatever it was. But I haven't seen any like actual concrete evidence of like a lender, I can't imagine they can repo the car. Probably not. But they can do, and I forgot what it's called now, where they say that um where they basically say that your entire balance is due.
Call the
I
note.
forgot what the term is, but
Call the note due.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
see
they
that.
could technically do that. I mean, if you're making your payments and everything's good, why? But then, why would you
But then
run into that? But
how they find out? This all goes back to like how there's no way they have access to any database that's going to tell them that they're renting their car. Like there's just no way to look that up. I
well,
mean,
how? Okay, so this is one, and I'm curious about this since you just mentioned this. Um, when you go to buy a car and you see like, and it'll say in the bottom, it'll say car rental use. Like, where are they getting that from?
what did you just say? I don't know.
So when you go to buy a car and you're like looking online at the car ad, and you're looking like down, you scroll down to see like vehicle history, and you kind of look where it says Carfax report and all that. Like it'll say like previous owner, one or two previous owners, and then it'll say car rental use. Just like it in the past, it would just say fleet use or commercial or yeah, like the manager, like when they use it for, but it'll say car rental use.
Well,
So
in
there's
my
clearly some.
but that's completely different because I think, I mean, I don't think that it would register that through Turo, because Turo, that's just so different. But when you register a car for like a major car rental company, like I could see them having to register that and that showing up on the Carfax for being in rental use. But when you're talking about Turo and most of these cars are people's personal cars, at least a vast majority of them, I can't really see that happening. I can't really see them being able to pull that from Turo's database or whatever, and then putting it in the program, because I'm sure that the biggest reason is they will get some sort of tags or some sort of registration or something with the purchasing of the car through the manufacturer that marks it as this is a rental car, and maybe that's why they get cheaper plates or cheaper insurance. I don't know how it works. But that's what I would think would brand it as a rental car, and that's where it'd go on the Carfax. But something like this, again, it's just a lot of it's personal use, personal vehicle. So I just can't see that. I just can't imagine them being able to collect that data.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. So Damien replied, "I'm located in California," because we had asked. And he says, "No, they do not, and that's what's been the scariest thing for me, and why I want a legit policy." Yeah, so that's what I was kind of like wondering, where he says he has 8 cars, and that now they're not allowing anymore. I'm surprised that they haven't asked, like with 8 cars already being insured, that they haven't asked like, hey, or looked into whichever way like Geico was able to look into for this person the other day, into, because this he was in California, like I
Mhm.
said. So I'm surprised that they haven't like said, why do you have 8 cars? And like why that hasn't been a red flag, right?
Yeah,
But yeah, definitely you want to be careful with that, because again, the important thing is not that, oh, they're, as long as I'm covered. Well, really you're not covered, because if you were to get into an accident, they're going to look at, and you're liable. They're going to look at everything. They're going to do all their research, and they're going to try to find, always in every situation, they always try to find a way to not have to pay that claim. If they
that's
do have to pay it, then they,
that situation that you brought up. That's like the craziest thing I've ever heard.
what, the Geico thing?
Yeah, that sounds like the odds of getting struck by lightning. That just sounds crazy. I can't believe that
I mean,
happened.
clearly they're getting, smarter with these, maybe maybe it's their way of, because you would say, well, they're it's actually better for you too, because you're not finding out 3 months later when you, let's say, God forbid, crashed the car, totaled the car on your own. Let's say you were driving it and you totaled the car, and now they come back and say, "No, no, no, your policy is void. Like you clearly says there you can't car share or ride share or whatever." And now you have no car, you owe the car to the bank, and that's it. And so maybe then you'll probably freak out and say, "Well, you didn't say that," and probably sue them, and you're still probably going to lose. So this is also their way of like avoiding, if they can catch it early on, avoiding like lawsuits or potential like headaches later on.
Mhm.
But yeah, Damon, I would definitely look into that, because again, yeah, you're at least getting by with the fact that you're meeting the state requirements of, having personal insurance and all that. But really, when you need it, if you were to need it, if you're at fault and it's a claim that they have to pay for on your behalf, and they do the research and they find out, they can just void your policy retroactively and say, no, you're not covered because your policy is not valid because you have. So definitely look into that
Yeah, it's
as
sketchy.
soon as you can.
Let's go to the question about private.
Which one?
Um, the private question,
Wait, say it again because I didn't hear which one you said.
the private rental question. How do I insure my vehicle in this case?
Have I not scrolled down enough? What's the user?
Not Naki missed.
I have, okay, so
I have a friend.
Nakima says, I have a friend. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Friend for me, she couldn't add my vehicle to her policy. Well, you don't. Okay, so if it's your okay, I'm gonna explain a little piece of the process. So, first thing you need to find out is she couldn't add my car. That would never be part of the process. If you're doing private rentals, like they're not adding your car to the policy. Typically, if they have comp and collision, which they have to have, comp and collision typically includes rental cars. So the first thing that I'd do is I'd ask her if her insurance is full coverage. If it is full coverage, then ask them or ask her. I probably wouldn't ask her because maybe she doesn't have the information, and I'd double verify just in case. Call the insurance company and ask them if the full coverage extends to the rental car. If it doesn't, then she's going to need to add that to her policy, and that's it. Like, you don't have to add anything to her policy. You don't have to do anything special. As long as it's a comp and collision, which is full coverage insurance policy, and it extends to the rental car, you're fine. The only other thing that you're going to need, and I know it's your friend, you probably don't really want to do this, but 100% do it, have a rental contract, just stating the terms. This is how much it costs. This is how much this and that. Because the thing is, if she gets in an accident, she won't have to pay no matter what. Either her insurance is going to pay or you're going to pay because they're not going to cover you. So if you have your contract in place, the insurance company's going to have to pay for it. But if you don't, then obviously you're not going to get anything. So yeah, just verify with her insurance and that should be good.
So I have a question on this. Is this someone are you doing private rentals, like just on your own renting? Because just a thought on this is that sometimes, so like if I were to go rent a car from Hertz, my insurance policy, personal insurance policy, will cover me for that car if I wanted to use my own personal insurance. But there are insurance companies that don't cover Turo. So they don't consider Turo like a car rental. Um, and I guess it could depend on the states and all that. So I'm curious, how, like, if you're renting your own, because you may absolutely need a rental agreement for the insurance company to consider you a car rental, company, and then provide coverage as a rented car. So there's like so many little nuances with insurance. I know I'm probably driving you crazy, Max, with all this crazy like, but I've just done so much research on this because it is really scary if you do have to look into, like, there's so many little parts, like the fact that some people think, well, I'm renting a car from Turo. It's a car rental. I should be covered just, through Geico, let's say, my personal policy, just like, and there's actually lawsuits. I was just reading one recently where they've been sued saying, yes, it should have covered. And so, like, so definitely take, a look into that. Make sure that that's, because I don't know exactly like how, if they have, like in your case, you have a car rental, company, you have your contracts, you have, so you would be considered a car rental.
Yeah, but anything, I mean, I like when we've had to submit insurance claims and contracts and stuff, insurance companies don't ask that. They're not like, do you have your LLC set up? Do you have your business bank set up? All they want is the rental contract, which is just verifying that like you have a contract between you as the person and the other person, or I guess the company and the person. And that's it. Like you don't really need to, I mean, it's nice to have all the other things set up, but in the logistical standpoint, from the insurance point of view, like you don't have to have your, I don't think, I'm about 90% sure, because they don't ask this, you don't have to have your LLC set up. We could have put no business at the top of the thing, and I'm sure they would have been fine. So I don't think that's like, I don't, there's a lot of logistics in private rentals, but there's only a select few that you really have to worry about. And then the others, like you should have, but like logistically, you don't really need them. Food for thought.
Yeah. Let's see. So, hello. Just want to bring this up. Side Hustler Societies. What's up, Yuly? Hey. Thanks for showing up. Where do you want to go next? Can't believe it's 9 o'clock.
I know. I think we about wrap it up. I think we gave some good information, and yeah, I think unless anybody has any last minute questions.
Yeah, and while we wait for that, I'll just bring up one quick thing, which has to do with a company that I reached out to. So recently Turo sent out some like updates and partnerships and things like that. And one of the things that they sent was this thing for financing. And I was, curious. And so I reached out to them and they explained what the requirements were. And basically it's like it's a floor plan financing, which means that you get sort of like a line of credit. And then you're able to just buy cars with that line of credit and just sort of like keep using it, paying it, replenishing it. And so I just want to bring up real quick, like the flyer for that.
Are you using a floor line?
No. And so I'm going to be contacting them in, because I didn't yet meet the requirements. You have to have 3 months bank statements, and the corporation has to been established. And I just established the corporation last month. So let's see if I can share the.
I've heard there's people get really worried about funding, but there's a lot of money out there. I mean, you can go to investors, you can go to banks, you can go to credit unions, you can get hard money loans. I mean, floor lines like this. People get really worried and they make the wrong mistakes, but I don't know. I think there's a lot of options out there for sure. Let's see, floor lines from.
Yeah, so this is so they're called AFC. And so one of the things, like the requirements, is that you have to have an LLC or an S Corp. You have to be open for at least 90 days. You have to have also 90 days worth of business bank statements. The car can't be same as Turo, can't be salvaged or rebuilt. 125,000 miles is the limit. They don't have a year requirement, but they do have the mileage.
Limit pre-purchase.
What was that?
That's their limit pre-purchase. So like it can go over that. It could be at 300,000 miles, but pre-purchase has to be under 125.
Yes. Just like, and then they also are going to require I believe they said they may require a personal guarantee. That one, I think they said may, depending on certain things. So don't quote me on that one. But they said you can buy at dealerships, private or auctions. The repayment terms are 24 months. And then, so the way it works is they said, whenever you're ready to buy, you would just go wherever it is you're going to buy from. And they just need you to send them a bill of sale. They actually need a picture of the title. And then and then they want to do like a virtual verification of the car, the VIN and the odometer. So they want to just make sure that all that is valid. And then when you do those 3 things, they will overnight a check to you.
Quick thought. I have a quick thought on this real quick. We don't do floor lines or anything, but I know people that do. And I'll just let you know what will happen. Like when people get into Turo, they're like, oh, I'm going to make some cash flow. I'm going to make some money every month. The thing about floor lines is you'll make equity every month. You'll make equity in the car. 20-month pay down, like that's really, really fast. Typical is like 5-6 years. But cash flow wise, like how much you're going to make every month, you're going to be negative. I promise you. Like I know people that are doing this right now. So if you're fine with that, if you can afford, if you're doing it full time, you only have a couple cars, and it's like your primary source of income. That concept, I mean, it's not going to work unless you can subsidize it somehow. Like you're going to be cash flow negative 100% on all those cars plus some, which is, I mean, you're kind of balancing it with, you're building equity a lot faster. But back to the concept of, your cash flow is going to be killed, which is fine if you can wait it out and build the equity fast. Like, I mean, good for you. Like that's great. But people that are in it for cash flow and need to make the money, that's not going to be the solution for you. I promise.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty 24 months. I was like, oh, it's kind of scary. But just, just something to think about. Go take a look at it and see. It may work for maybe some people, probably not for most, but
Yeah.
definitely an option. And then they also had like I think it's called Westlake. Is it Westlake? I think, which is like the typical, like if you go to Car Gurus, it's one of those companies that alongside Capital One that finance you.
Mhm.
But they sort of have like I believe it's called Westlake. Westlake Fleet, specifically for fleet. So just another thing to go check out if you're interested.
Yeah.
So did we get any additional? So Ron says, I understand Uber is beginning car sharing as a competitor to Turo. I believe they are testing it out in Boston market right now. What are your thoughts on this? They have a huge customer base.
Wow. Thinking about it from like a Turo standpoint, it's an additional way to rent your car out. So I think it's a good opportunity for people that are already on Turo. Maybe it's opening us up to an additional market. But for some reason, a lot of people when they talk about it, they're really scared. Like the business that they're building is going to be very similar to Turo in the sense that it's car sharing. The only difference is they are obviously a bigger company and they're different. But I love it. I'm completely fine. I mean, if they can build something similar and have more customers, because I know they have like I don't know the numbers or percentages, but they have a lot more customers than Turo. Like, right? I mean, if you can jump on that early and build that customer base within that company, hell yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to be part of that. If once they open it up in Phoenix, I'm gonna I'll put my cars on right away. I have no problem with that at all.
I think I took a look at it when they first started it, and I don't know, I can't remember now what it was that I thought that I just wasn't too. I think it was a little bit like is it Hire Car that has just different ways of like it
Yeah,
just works differently than Turo, and I'll have to check it out again, see if they changed
well,
something.
the way it's structured now, the last time I saw it, is it's like I forget the companies, kind of like Expedia, where you can go on and find like the cheapest car, and it's a conglomerate of all of like Alamo, Budget, Hertz, Enterprise. Like it's all of those cars in their system. But if it's something like that, if it's something like Turo, I'm all in. Like I'd love to be a part of that. But if it's something like that, I wouldn't. I probably wouldn't be part of it. I mean, the problem with um, uh, those sites, those big sites where they have all the big companies, is there's a lot of the times where those big companies can charge very very low prices and still be profitable somewhat. And it's kind of similar to Turo, and instead of it being a race to the bottom, you're just entering at the bottom. So if it's like that, I won't. But if it's something similar to Turo, I'd definitely love to be a part of that, part of that process, part of that company, for sure.
Yeah, I think things are changing so often that it's like we're always just gonna have to kind of be like looking at what's next. And I mean, eventually, will Toro even exist when we have like driverless cars? So
Probably
maybe we
not.
should start investing in. We can get together and let's just start making some like robotic cars.
I should Waymo.
But I don't know if we're gonna be Tesla at that. So I don't know.
Well, Waymo, they already have a taxi service that's driverless in Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. We take those all the time at the airport. We love those.
That's crazy. Yeah, I've seen a video on it. Um, Side Hustler Society, which by the way, make sure to check out if you're interested in getting like finance tips. Awesome, awesome information over there. Are there any insurance companies that you recommend in particular that don't mind if you are car sharing on Turo?
I mean, the biggest ones would obviously just be the fleet insurance companies, which is GMI, ABI, Lula, and then there's a couple other ones. Those are just the main ones I know of. And
Those
then,
are ones if you're not using the car for personal.
yeah, well, you could still use it for personal. You just can't use it a
Oh,
lot.
but you have the commercial. Remember, it's a little different. The
Yeah, I don't
full commercial
know at all.
to the little like Turo ABI period X is called, and then the Lula OTP or whatever policy is different from like your full commercial policy, right? So where they're specifically telling you like, hey, you cannot use this car for personal reasons. Only for business purposes, like only to take it to get car washes, only to get maintenance, and you're limited to 300 miles for that business purpose.
I'm driving my minivan home tonight.
Huh?
I'm driving one of our company minivans home tonight. Hope they don't catch me.
No, but I think you have their full commercial policy is a different policy than the
Yeah, I don't know. I know the basics of insurance, but there's a lot. I don't know the depths like that. I don't know that. I can't talk much on
yeah, I think once I put these new cars that I'm gonna be buying on under the LLC, that I'm gonna be looking to do the full commercial
it.
policy and hopefully bring on my current, my current 2 cars and figure that out because this whole insurance thing is really is a pain to have to deal with. But to add to that, also Liberty Mutual is one that I know offers personal insurance for people who are doing Turo. But last I checked, and this was maybe it was like 6 or 8 months ago now, I don't know. It was a ridiculous amount. But maybe they've changed, maybe they've lowered it to kinda get a little bit more into the market, so you
Mm,
can check that out.
yeah.
And I think if you want, this can be he says, "Got it, thanks. You're welcome." And so I think this if you want, this could be our last question. It's the last one we have here now. Is, Nakima says, "What do you guys think about buying from online auction like Copart?" That's all you since you're the
Um.
online auction buyer.
Uh, I don't know. We only buy and have our mechanic look at them in person. The thing that scares me about online auction is like they'll take photos and they'll do like their little auction report and do their their score or whatever. But they could still miss things. They still make mistakes, and it's not worth it. I mean, it's not worth it to buy a car that you don't know what you're buying, and maybe there's a big problem or a mistake with it, and it's going to cost you money. It's just not worth it. And I understand you can get really good deals. There's maybe some very few exceptions, but for me, it's not worth the risk. Like the auctions we have in Phoenix, there's thousands of cars weekly. I mean, thousands and thousands of cars that are going through weekly. So we have tons of variety. We have tons of option. We have great pricing, at least I think here. So I don't know. I'm not big on that idea. We have our mechanic. He looks at every single one. He starts them. He puts them in drive, reverse, feels if there's any like motor mounts going. So we really get our money's worth when we pay him to go do that. So I just know. I mean, my answer is no. I wouldn't buy cars at online auctions right now. It's just not worth it. And if you're going to arbitrate it, like if you buy something really far away, you ship it to you, and then you have to arbitrate it, which means give it back to the auction because something was wrong with it. Like you did a post-sale inspection, means they like looked over everything and they green lighted it, meaning everything looks good. And then there's something wrong with it. Like now you got to ship it back. You just shipped it to you. You got to ship it back. I mean, that's $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. So it's not worth it. It's not worth the hassle. I wouldn't want to do that myself.
Awesome. All right. I think we've pretty much covered. Sorry if we missed any questions, guys. Today we actually had quite a few, but I think we pretty much covered everything. Had an awesome chat. You wanna say any last closing thoughts?
Not really. I appreciate everybody joining. I know that this is kind of step one on getting started with Turo, or even on any step that you're at is just getting the information, learning what you can, and never stop doing that at any level. I'm only at 20 cars and I'm still learning every single day, and I need to. I know people that are at 200 cars and they're still learning every single day. It's a necessity. So never think you're too good to keep learning, and just keep watching videos and keep talking to people. And if you need any help, just email me. My company email is Heart Car Rentals, or it's Heart Rentals AZ at gmail.com. Just reach out and I'll help you with whatever I can. But really just keep learning, and I hope the best to everybody. I appreciate being here.
I just want to bring up Ryan says, Max, your content is fire, bro. Really thankful for what you're putting out. Yes,
Appreciate
definitely.
Thank you.
Where his information, and then he also goes and brings you guys all levels of other hosts, which is, like we said, there's so many different things you're learning at the different levels.
Yeah.
And
Happy.
I mean, I don't know, there is one question here. I don't know if you want to, where do you buy your cars? It was just kind of tagged onto that last question that, you basically buy your cars at auction. So,
Well, we buy auction and private. That's it. Auction private.
so again, thank you guys so much, everyone that's been here live and watching this on the replay later. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your questions. Hopefully, we've given you guys some value, and hopefully, we can keep doing these weekly. Maybe so either Max and I will keep doing them together. I guess maybe sometimes Max will probably be taking breaks. Hopefully not, but since he's very busy. But again, for now, I think we're hoping to kind of do these weekly. So hopefully you guys can keep joining.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
Right? Thank you guys. Bye bye.